Welcome to the Drowsy Historian. Tonight, I invite you to step back through time and into the heart of ancient Roman leisure, to a world of steamy marble chambers, rippling pools, whispered intrigue, and the gentle echoes of sandals on mosaic floors. The Roman bathhouse was far more than a place to cleanse the body. It was a social stage, a political arena, and at times a dangerous space where the line between pleasure and peril blurred. As you settle into comfort, perhaps beneath warm blankets, imagine yourself strolling through vast colonnaded halls filled with the gentle murmur of voices, and the scent of oils and damp stone lingering in the air. You are about to explore a side of Roman life that was as complex as it was essential. A daily ritual that shaped the very rhythm of the ancient city. From the toil of unseen workers to the whispered conspiracies of senators. From vibrant mosaics beneath your feet to the invisible dangers in the steam. This journey will reveal why you, a modern soul, might not have lasted a single day in a Roman bathhouse. So breathe deeply, let your thoughts drift, and allow yourself to be guided through this calming and curious chapter of history. Our first chapter began not in the soothing waters of the baths themselves, but deep beneath them where the real work began. Chapter 1, Heating the Baths, Slave Work and Hot Stones in the Heart of Ancient Rome. Among grand temples and crowded streets stood some of the most impressive public buildings the empire would ever produce. The thermae, or Roman bathhouses, were vast and elaborate, places of daily ritual and social life. Citizens from all walks of life gathered here to bathe, exercise, gossip, and conduct business. But few gave thought to the hidden world beneath their polished floors. Few imagined the relentless labor required to heat these mighty complexes, and fewer still could have endured it. Beneath the marble and mosaic, deep in the belly of the bathhouse, there lay a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers known as the hypocaust. Here, fires blazed hot and constant, feeding warmth through the very stones of the baths above. The hypocaust was the unseen heart of the bathhouse. Without it, the grand halls would be cold and silent, the shimmering pools uninviting. It was here that the true work of the baths began each day. Before dawn, long before the first citizen would arrive to bathe, the fires had to be stoked. Slaves assigned to this brutal work were roused from sleep in the darkness of early morning. Some were owned by the state, others leased from private masters. Their labor was backbreaking, their world harsh. Day after day, they toiled in choking heat, unseen and unthanked. The process of heating a great bathhouse was no simple matter. Vast furnaces were set beneath the caldarium, the hottest room in the complex. Heat from these fires traveled through brick pillars and hollow spaces beneath the floor, rising into the rooms above. The floors themselves were designed to absorb and radiate this heat. Along the walls, flues carried warmth upward, ensuring even the highest reaches of the grand vaulted ceilings remained comfortably heated. Managing these fires required great skill. Too little heat, and the baths would be lukewarm, disappointing patrons. Too much, and the marble could crack, or the air become suffocating. A careful balance was needed, and achieving it meant constant vigilance. Imagine the scene. The hypocaust is dark, lit only by the red glow of flames. The air is thick with smoke. Soot clings to every surface. The heat is overwhelming, rising steadily as the fires grow. Slaves work tirelessly, hauling wood, feeding the furnaces, adjusting dampers to control the flow of heat. Sweat runs in rivers down their bodies. Breathing is laborious. The acrid sting of smoke burns the eyes and throat. Yet there is no rest. The fires must be kept at an even blaze, hour after hour. The fuel itself posed a constant challenge. Olive wood was prized for its slow, even burn, but was costly and not always available. Lesser woods burned too quickly or produced excessive smoke. Procuring enough fuel for the great thermi of Rome was a logistical feat in itself. Wagons of wood arrived daily, stacked high in the courtyards behind the baths, ready for the endless appetite of the furnaces. Once inside the hypocaust, the slaves moved in a rhythm born of experience. Each team knew their tasks. Younger slaves fetched the wood. Older, more experienced men managed the fires, gauging their heat by feel and by long habit. Overseers, often freedmen who had once worked in the hypocaust themselves, patrolled constantly, issuing terse orders. Mistakes were not tolerated. A bathhouse that opened with cold rooms could damage reputations, driving away the elite clientele. And for the slaves, failure often meant harsh punishment. Injuries were common. A misstep could mean burned flesh or broken limbs. The constant exposure to smoke ruined lungs. Life expectancy among hypocaust workers was grim. Yet despite the dangers, some slaves took a bitter pride in their work. To master the fires of a great bathhouse was to hold a vital skill. In a city obsessed with public image and comfort, ensuring the baths were perfectly heated gave these unseen men a measure of importance. As the fires roared to life, heat rose through the stone floors above. In the caldarium, the hottest room, temperatures would soon soar. The marble walls would radiate warmth. Pools would shimmer with rising steam. In the tepidarium, a gentler warmth spread, creating an inviting space for relaxation. The frigidarium, its waters untouched by the fires, would remain cool and bracing. Each room offered a carefully crafted experience. The skill of the firemen determined its success. Above, bath attendants prepared the public spaces. Benches were scrubbed, towels and oils laid out. The grand doors would soon open. Patrons would arrive expecting perfection, oblivious to the labor unfolding beneath their feet. For the slaves of the hypocaust, this was the rhythm of life, a cycle of endless work. Fire, smoke, heat, exhaustion. Day after day, their world was far removed from the luxury enjoyed above. Yet without them, the baths would stand cold and empty. They were the unseen force behind Rome's daily ritual of bathing. As you rest now, picture that hidden realm. The flicker of flames, the clatter of wood, the low murmur of weary voices. Above, marble statues gleamed. Water awaited its first bather. The fires burned on. Soon the bathhouse would awaken. Patrons would stream through its doors, seeking comfort, gossip, escape. But for the slaves below, the day's hardest work was just beginning. In the next segment, we will remain a little longer in this world of stone and fire, following the rhythm of the laboring slaves as their day unfolds beneath the mighty baths of Rome. Heating the baths, slave work, and hot stones. As the morning wore on, the fires within the hypocaust reached their peak. The heavy stone floors of the great bathhouse above now pulsed gently with rising warmth. For the slaves below, this was the most demanding part of the day. The initial stoking had been achieved, but maintaining the perfect balance of heat required constant, almost instinctive attention. Too much wood and the temperatures in the caldarium could soar dangerously high. Too little, and the luxurious tepidarium would cool too quickly. The air inside the hypocaust remained thick and stifling. Though the fires were skillfully banked, every breath carried the sharp tang of smoke and soot. The walls, slick with condensation, seemed to close in around the workers. Torches fixed to the brick arches gave off flickering light, barely cutting through the swirling haze. The floor beneath the slaves' feet trembled faintly with the roar of the fires. In this dim, oppressive world, Each task became an act of endurance. Wood had to be hauled constantly from the storerooms to feed the insatiable flames. The piles of logs stacked high against the hypocaust's walls diminished steadily. Young slaves darted back and forth, arms laden with kindling and fuel, sweat pouring from their bodies. Older, more experienced firemen managed the furnaces themselves. Their faces, blackened with soot, bore the marks of countless days spent in this harsh environment. Communication was sparse and economical. The roar of the flames and the groan of the shifting timbers made conversation difficult. Simple gestures or shouted commands conveyed what was needed. Overseers, their tunics damp with sweat, paced the tunnels, checking temperatures by touch and sight. They would press their palms to the heated walls, test the air rising from floor vents, watch the behavior of the flames. Any deviation from the ideal could draw swift correction. The bathhouse above was now awakening. The first sounds of life drifted down from the changing rooms as attendants opened the great doors to the public. Footsteps echoed through the marble halls. The muted thump of sandals on stone signaled the arrival of early patrons. For the slaves below, these noises marked a shift in rhythm. The initial rush of preparation gave way to a sustained effort to keep the fire steady. It was no less taxing. The pace remained relentless. Fuel consumption peaked in the late morning as the number of bathers swelled. The caldarium demanded intense, unwavering heat to maintain its signature steamy atmosphere. The tepidarium required careful moderation to remain soothing. The frigidarium, untouched by direct heat, needed only the cool touch of shaded air and fresh water. Yet even here the slaves' work was felt indirectly. The aqueducts supplying the baths were maintained by teams of laborers who ensured a constant flow of clean water. Coordination among the various groups of workers was vital. A well-run bathhouse operated like a finely tuned machine, each part reliant upon the others. The slaves of the hypocaust took a grim satisfaction in their role within this complex system. Though their toil was invisible to the patrons above, they knew that the comfort and reputation of the entire establishment rested upon their efforts. There was no room for error. Failure to maintain the fires could lead to complaints from the elite, damage to the bathhouse's standing, and swift punishment for those deemed responsible. Injuries among the firemen were a constant threat. The cramped quarters and intense heat took their toll. Burns were common. Collapse from heat exhaustion occurred frequently. The most experienced among them knew the signs well, urging their fellows to take brief moments of rest when possible. Water was rationed carefully. A single gulp of cool water between shifts at the furnace could mean the difference between collapse and survival, and yet there was a certain rhythm to the work. The labor, though grueling, followed a familiar pattern. The older slaves guided the younger, teaching them the subtleties of managing the fires, reading the behavior of the stone, knowing when to add wood and when to hold back. In this shared hardship, a form of camaraderie emerged. The bonds formed among the firemen were strong, born of shared suffering and mutual reliance. Meanwhile, above, the baths filled with life. Laughter, conversation, and the splash of water echoed faintly down into the hypocaust. The patrons, clad in fine tunics or draped in towels, moved from room to room, oblivious to the effort that kept their surroundings so perfectly comfortable. They spoke of politics, business, and the affairs of the city, never pausing to consider the labor hidden beneath the stone beneath their feet. For the slaves of the hypocaust, this was their world. Day after day, week after week, they toiled in the shadows, their lives bound to the flames. They knew no comfort, no leisure, only the endless cycle of heat and exhaustion. And yet, their unseen work sustained one of Rome's most cherished institutions. Without them, the baths would grow cold, their marble halls empty. As midday approached, the rhythm of the fires settled into a steady pulse. The greatest demands of the morning rush were passing, yet the day was far from over. Ahead lay hours more of tending the flames, adjusting the heat, responding to the ebb and flow of patrons above. The fires would burn until late into the afternoon. Only after the last bather departed and the attendants began to clean the halls would the slaves of the hypocaust be permitted to let the fires die down. Even then, their work was not done. Ashes had to be cleared, equipment cleaned, preparations made for the next day's labor. This was the life of the firemen, a life of endless heat and toil. Their world remained hidden, their efforts unacknowledged. Yet without them, the Roman bathhouse, that grand symbol of civic life and luxury, could not exist. Now, with the fires at their height and the baths alive with activity, we shall leave the depths of the hypocaust behind. In the next chapter, we will follow the citizens of Rome themselves, stepping into the baths above to experience the daily rituals of cleansing, relaxation, and social life that define their world. Chapter 2, a citizen's daily soak as the fires burned steadily below and the floors of the thermae radiated warmth. The upper halls of the great Roman bathhouse sprang to life. The doors, tall and ornately carved, had been flung open in the early hours, welcoming the first wave of patrons. These grand spaces, often financed by emperors or wealthy benefactors, were more than simple bathing facilities. They were marvels of architecture, boasting towering vaulted ceilings, intricate mosaics, and rows of statuary depicting gods, heroes, and emperors. Citizens arrived from every corner of the city. The hour varied according to one's station and occupation. The laboring classes, granted respite after morning duties, might visit in the early afternoon. Merchants and artisans appeared between business dealings. The elite often chose the late afternoon, when the baths were at their busiest and most socially advantageous. Entering the vestibule, visitors were greeted by the bathhouse attendants. Slaves and freedmen, known as capsari, managed the belongings of the bathers. For a small fee, these attendants stored garments and valuables in designated niches. Robbery was not uncommon, and the capsari's reputation could make or break their livelihood. Having disrobed, the bather moved into the first main chamber, the apoditerium or changing room. This was often a grand space in its own right, adorned with colorful frescoes and elegant benches. Here, the atmosphere buzzed with conversation. Patrons greeted acquaintances, exchanged gossip, and debated the matters of the day. The bathhouse was as much a social forum as a place of cleansing. From the apoditerium, the bather progressed into the palestra, a large courtyard or exercise yard. Physical activity was an integral part of the bathing routine. Before immersing themselves in the warm waters, Romans engaged in various exercises to prepare the body. The sounds of grunting athletes, the rhythmic strike of leather balls, and the slap of feet upon packed earth filled the air. Some practiced wrestling, their oiled bodies gleaming under the sun. Others worked with weights, stretched, or engaged in ball games. The goal was to open the pores, encouraging the body to release impurities. The scent of sweat mingled with the more pleasant aromas of the perfumes and oils sold nearby. Vendors lined the edges of the palestra, offering a selection of scented unguents, cleansing pastes, and massage oils. Patrons selected their preferred blends, each combination a subtle marker of taste and status. Following exercise, the bather moved into the bathing sequence itself. The exact order varied by personal preference and a particular design of the bathhouse, but a common progression was followed by most. The journey typically began in the tepidarium. This warm room served as an intermediate stage. allowing the body to gradually adjust from the cool air of the palestra to the heat of the deeper baths. The tepidarium was richly appointed, with smooth marble benches lining the walls and elaborate ceiling decorations. Light filtered softly through high windows, illuminating the shimmering surfaces. Here, bathers reclined, chatting amiably with companions, while slaves applied scented oils to their skin. The warmth of the room relaxed the muscles, preparing the body for deeper cleansing. Next came the caldarium, the heart of the bathhouse. This large dome chamber pulsed with heat, the air thick with steam rising from the hot pools. The stone floors radiated warmth beneath the feet. Upon entering, the bather felt an immediate embrace of humid heat, opening every pore. Slaves stood ready with scrapers or strigils to assist in the cleansing process. Oil was first applied liberally across the skin. The bather would then sweat profusely in the caldarium's heat. After sufficient perspiration, the strigils were used to scrape away the oil, sweat, and accumulated grime, leaving the skin cleansed and invigorated. Conversation continued throughout this ritual. The baths served as a vital venue for maintaining social connections, forging alliances, and exchanging news. Senators and merchants, poets and soldiers, all mingled in the steam. The rigid structures of Roman hierarchy softened by the shared ritual of bathing. From the caldarium, many bathers proceeded to the frigidarium. This cool, often circular room housed a large cold plunge pool. The sudden immersion in chilled water served to close the pores and invigorate the body after the intense heat of the caldarium. The shock of the cold was bracing, a final cleansing before relaxation. The transition from hot to cold was not merely physical. It carried a symbolic weight, a reminder of life's balance between extremes, between effort and ease. Throughout this process, attendants moved quietly among the patrons, offering towels, oils, and refreshments. Musicians sometimes played softly in adjoining chambers. The entire experience was designed to soothe and restore both body and mind. For the citizens of Rome, this daily or weekly ritual was indispensable. The baths were a refuge from the noise and dust of the city, a place to unwind, reconnect, and maintain health. It was said that a day without a visit to the baths was a day wasted. Now, as you imagine the sounds of splashing water, the low hum of conversation, and the gentle clink of oil jars, let your mind drift deeper into this world of ritual and relaxation. In the next segment, we shall continue this journey, following the rhythms of the bathers as they move through the grand halls, exploring the finer details of their daily soak and the subtle social dances performed within these storied walls. The flow of daily life within the Roman bathhouse was a choreography of both the body and the mind. Having completed their progression through the tepidarium, caldarium, and frigidarium, many patrons did not depart immediately. Instead, they lingered within the vast marble-clad halls, savoring the atmosphere and the company. Some chose to return to the tepidarium, its moderate warmth a gentle contrast to the cold plunge. Here, patrons reclined on cushioned benches, their skin refreshed and glowing from the cleansing rituals. Conversations resumed or deepened. Friends debated philosophy or politics. Business deals were struck in quiet corners. News of distant provinces or the latest court intrigues passed from ear to ear. The bathhouse remained one of the few places where the boundaries of class were softened. Senators and soldiers, artisans and scholars, all shared the same waters, though subtle cues of status persisted in manner and speech. Beyond the main bathing rooms, many thermae featured additional amenities. Libraries, lecture halls, and shaded gardens provided spaces for quieter pursuits. It was not uncommon for a citizen to spend hours within the bathhouse complex, moving from physical exertion to intellectual stimulation and back again. Massage was another favorite indulgence. Skilled masseurs, often Greek slaves trained in the art, offered their services within side chambers. Using a blend of oils and practiced hands, they worked tension from muscles, easing the body after exercise and bathing. For the Roman elite, such treatments were as much about status as comfort. The choice of oils, the reputation of one's masseur, these were subtle markers observed and discussed. Vendors circulated throughout the complex, offering refreshments suited to the setting. Dried fruits, nuts, and light wines were common. Consuming heavy meals within the baths was frowned upon, as it was believed to interfere with the healthful effects of the rituals. Yet a glass of spiced wine, sipped while reclining in the tepidarium, was considered both agreeable and proper. Time seemed to flow differently within the baths. The bustle of the city faded beyond the thick walls. Within the marble embrace of the Thermae, a sense of timelessness prevailed. It was a space apart, where the usual concerns of Roman life were momentarily set aside. Even so, subtle forms of competition and display remained. The choice of companions, the quality of one's garments and oils, the ease with which one navigated the social currents of the baths, all contributed to one's standing. For new arrivals to the city, the baths were both an opportunity and a test. To be seen with the right people, to demonstrate the correct manners, could open doors elsewhere. Missteps, however, were quickly noted. Etiquette within the baths, though unwritten, was well understood. Loud boasting or crudeness was frowned upon. Aggressive displays of wealth were considered poor taste. The ideal bather moved with a certain ease, engaging in conversation without dominance, showing refinement without arrogance. For many, the baths offered a vital counterpoint to the rigid hierarchies of Roman society. Here, stripped of togas and insignia, citizens encountered one another more directly. It was a place where bonds could be forged across divides of class or origin, where alliances might be formed that extended beyond the walls of Thermae. Yet not all bathers sought company. Some preferred solitude, choosing quieter corners of the complex, or returning again to the frigidarium for a second plunge. The baths accommodated both the gregarious and the reserved, each finding their own rhythm within the space. The architecture itself encouraged this balance. Grand open halls fostered community, while smaller side rooms and alcoves offered privacy. The play of light across mosaic floors, the gentle murmur of water, the subtle warmth of the air, all contributed to an atmosphere both social and contemplative. As the day advanced, the composition of the crowd shifted. Merchants and tradesmen gave way to wealthier citizens whose afternoons were more leisurely. Senators and magistrates arrived, often accompanied by entourages. Their presence added a new layer of conversation as political matters wove through the steam-filled air. Even the emperor himself might be glimpsed at certain public baths, though accompanied by guards and confined to reserved spaces. The rhythms of the baths mirrored those of the city itself, a microcosm of Roman life within walls of stone and water. Now, as you imagine the soft splash of fountains, the low hum of voices, and the gentle caress of warm air upon the skin, let your thoughts drift deeper into this world of daily ritual. In the chapters ahead, we will explore not only the pleasures of the bathhouse, but also its hidden perils, the unspoken dangers that lurked beneath the surface of this cherished Roman institution. Chapter 3. The Hidden Dangers. Disease and filth beneath the surface, beneath the polished veneer of the Roman bathhouse. Behind its gleaming marble and sophisticated engineering, lurked hidden dangers that many patrons either ignored or underestimated. Though the baths stood as icons of Roman civilization, places of cleansing and health, they were also environments ripe for the spread of illness and infection. The very qualities that made the thermi appealing to the senses, the humid air, the warm surfaces, the constant flow of bodies, also created conditions in which bacteria, parasites, and contagions could thrive. In an age before germ theory, Romans viewed health in terms of bodily humors and the balance of airs. They recognized the benefits of bathing and sweating, believing these practices expelled impurities. Yet their understanding of disease was incomplete. The unseen world of microbes remained unknown, and as a result, many bathers unwittingly exposed themselves to considerable risks during their daily rituals. Imagine entering the caldarium, its air thick with steam. Dozens of patrons crowd the space, their skin glistening with sweat and oil. The stone benches, though wiped periodically, remain slick from constant use. Water splashes onto the floor, pooling in crevices. The very heat that relaxes the body also encouraged the growth of bacteria. In these damp conditions, skin infections were common. Boils, rashes, and fungal afflictions could spread rapidly from one bather to another. Shared implements posed their own hazards. The strigils used to scrape the skin were typically made of metal, passed from hand to hand, sometimes inadequately cleaned between uses. Even the towels provided by attendants might harbor unseen agents of disease. The cold plunge pool of the frigidarium, so refreshing to the senses, carried its own risks. The water, reused throughout the day, became increasingly contaminated as more bathers immersed themselves. Eye infections and ear ailments were frequent complaints. Gastrointestinal illnesses could spread when patrons, their hands unwashed after handling oil and sweat, consumed refreshments within the baths. Beyond these immediate concerns, the crowded conditions of the larger thermi facilitated the spread of respiratory ailments. The enclosed spaces, dense with bodies and humid air, allowed coughs and sneezes to travel unchecked. In times of epidemic, the baths could act as amplifiers of contagion, hastening the spread of illness through the city. Parasitic infections were another common hazard. The warm, moist environment supported the life cycles of various skin parasites. Lice and fleas found ready hosts among the throngs of bathers. The communal nature of the baths, where personal boundaries were relaxed, made such transmissions all but inevitable. Despite these dangers, the allure of the bathhouse remained strong. For many Romans, the benefits seemed to outweigh the risks. Bathing was a vital part of social life, a marker of civilization. To avoid the baths entirely would invite questions about one's health or social standing. Yet, some were more cautious. Wealthier patrons sometimes employed personal slaves to manage their interactions within the baths. These attendants might bring private oils, strigils, and towels, ensuring a degree of protection. Reserved spaces within the grander thermi offered greater privacy and cleanliness, though access was limited to those of means. Physicians of the time offered varying advice. Some recommended bathing only in the mornings, when the facilities were freshly cleaned and less crowded. Others advised against prolonged stays in the hotter chambers, believing that excessive exposure could weaken the body's defenses. These precautions, though sensible, could only mitigate the inherent risks of the environment. The design of the baths themselves contributed to the problem. While Roman engineering was advanced, with sophisticated drainage and water systems, maintenance was not always perfect. Blocked drains could lead to stagnant water. Cracks in the stone allowed mold and mildew to flourish. The constant influx of new patrons, each bringing the dust and detritus of the streets, ensured a steady accumulation of filth despite the efforts of attendants. The psychological impact of these hidden dangers varied. Some patrons remained blissfully unaware, their trust in the system unshaken. Others harbored quiet doubts, glancing uneasily at reddened skin or the coughing of fellow bathers. For all its splendor, the Roman bathhouse was a place of contradictions. It offered cleanliness and comfort, yet harbored unseen threats. It promised health and vigor, yet could sap strength through invisible contagions. As you imagine the scene, the elegant halls and shimmering pools, consider the unseen world that moved alongside the bathers. The dance of water and heat, so pleasing to the senses, also nurtured life of a very different kind. In the next segment, we will delve deeper into these dangers, exploring how the citizens of Rome navigated the fine balance between indulgence and caution within the baths. Chapter 4, The Fall of Gaius Verus, Corruption and Trial Among. The many figures whose lives intersected with the grand world of the Roman baths. Few offer as vivid an illustration of excess, corruption, and eventual downfall as Gaius Verus. His name, forever linked with misrule and moral decay, stands as a cautionary tale of the perils that could befall those who let indulgence cloud their judgment. Born into a family of modest standing, Verus rose through the ranks of Roman political life by means that were, even by the relaxed standards of the time, notably unscrupulous. His ascent was marked by a cunning mastery of alliances, a willingness to exploit every opportunity, and an insatiable appetite for wealth and luxury. By the time he was appointed governor of Sicily, Verus had already cultivated a reputation for opulence. His fondness for the baths was well known. Unlike many of his peers who treated the Thermae as a place of routine cleansing and social interaction, Verus viewed them as a personal theater of grandeur. Upon his arrival in Sicily, he wasted no time in commissioning lavish renovations to the provincial bathhouses, diverting public funds to line the walls with rare marbles and import exquisite statues. The centerpiece of the indulgences was a vast caldarium of his own design, fitted with gilded fixtures and supplied with perfumed steam. Attendance at these baths was not optional for the local elite. Verus summoned the most influential figures of Sicilian society to attend him daily, turning the baths into an extension of his political dominion. Here, beneath the vaulted ceilings and amid the swirling steam, he conducted much of his governance. Those who sought his favor were expected to flatter and gift him lavishly, their offerings displayed openly within the bathhouse. The abuses of power extended further still. Verus appropriated private estates to fund his pleasures, seizing fine oils and perfumes from local merchants under the guise of state needs. Skilled bath attendants were forcibly conscripted into his service, their talents used to enhance his private experiences. The plight of these individuals, though largely unrecorded, would have been bitter. Pulled from their former lives, they labored under constant threat, their every action scrutinized by a capricious master. Yet Verus remained blind to the growing resentment around him. Enclosed within the luxury of his world, he mistook the forced smiles of his companions for genuine admiration. It was within the baths that he committed some of his most brazen acts. Guests were compelled to watch as he flaunted his wealth and power, parading favored concubines and staging ostentatious feasts amid the steam-filled chambers. The baths, once a place of communal life, were transformed into symbols of oppression under his rule. News of Verus' conduct eventually reached Rome, carried by aggrieved merchants, displaced nobles, and those driven to desperation by his predations. The charges that followed were sweeping: embezzlement, extortion, abuse of office. But it was the accounts of his debaucheries within the baths that captured public attention. Rome, a city that prided itself on moral rectitude, even amid its own indulgences, was scandalized. Cicero, then an ambitious advocate, seized upon the case with vigor. In the Forum, he painted a portrait of Verus as the very embodiment of vice. His speeches described not merely the theft of public funds, but the perversion of Roman values. He spoke of marble halls tainted by corruption, of sacred spaces of civic life turned into dens of excess. The baths, central to daily Roman existence, became the stage upon which Verzi's guilt was made plain. Public outrage swelled. The contrast between the virtuous ideal of Roman governance and the sordid reality of Verzi's rule was too stark to ignore. His former allies abandoned him, unwilling to be associated with such disgrace. The trial, when it came, was swift. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the skilled rhetoric of Cicero, jurors had little choice but to flee. Exile followed, his fortunes stripped, his name forever stained. His story lingered long in the memory of Rome, for years afterward. The mere mention of his name conjured images of moral failure and the corrupting power of unchecked indulgence. The bathhouse, for all its associations with health and community, had also become a place where arrogance and hubris were laid bare. As you reflect on the fall of Gaius Verres, consider the fragile balance that the baths represented. They were spaces of equality where citizens of all ranks mingled, yet they could also reveal the darker sides of human nature, magnifying flaws as easily as virtues. In the next segment, we will continue this story, exploring the aftermath of Verres' trial and the ways in which his legacy shaped attitudes toward public life and the baths themselves. The trial of Gaius Verres left an indelible mark on Roman society. Though many officials had been known for excess, the sheer brazenness of Verres' actions and the vivid public nature of his indulgences stood out as a warning to others in power. The spectacle of his prosecution, particularly the detailed accounts of his abuses within the bathhouses, captured the imagination of the Roman people. Cicero's carefully crafted orations had not merely chronicled financial crimes, but painted the baths themselves as a mirror reflecting Verres' moral decay. In doing so, he elevated the bathhouse from a mundane element of civic life to a stage where the virtues and vices of Roman leadership could be displayed for all to see. In the weeks following Verzi's sentencing, the mood within the public baths of Rome shifted perceptibly. The usual carefree atmosphere gave way, for a time, to hushed conversations and knowing glances. Citizens debated the trial in the tepidarium, weighing the implications for their own leaders. The name of Verres was whispered with a mixture of revulsion and grim satisfaction. In some quarters, bath attendants adopted new standards of cleanliness and decorum, eager to distance their establishments from the scandal. More conscientious officials oversaw the operations of the bathhouses, mindful of public scrutiny. The baths had always occupied an uneasy space between public virtue and private indulgence. Now that tension was heightened. For Rome's elite, the downfall of Verres served as a cautionary tale. Those who might have once used the baths as venues for overt displays of wealth or debauchery adopted a more restrained approach. The grand spectacles that Verres had favored lavish banquets within the caldarium. Perfumed fountains, parades of concubines fell out of favor. Simpler, more dignified uses of the baths became the new fashion. Meanwhile, for the common citizens of Rome, the story reinforced long-standing suspicions about the conduct of the powerful. While many still embraced the baths as vital spaces for socializing and relaxation, they did so with a new awareness of the dangers of unchecked authority. Gossip flourished, and any official seen indulgent too freely risked public censure. Yet even as the city absorbed the lessons of the trial, certain aspects of Verres' influence lingered. His investments in Sicilian bathhouses had introduced a new level of opulence, and elements of this grandeur gradually found their way to Rome. The finest bathhouses now boasted even more elaborate mosaics, imported marbles, and artistic embellishments, though these flourishes were presented under the guise of civic pride rather than personal vanity. In literary circles, Verres became a symbol, Poets and playwrights referenced his excesses obliquely, using his name as shorthand for corruption. Philosophers wrote treatises on the dangers of luxury, often citing the baths as spaces where moderation must be exercised. Even generations later, Roman fathers would caution their sons against the perils of idleness and indulgence, invoking the story of Vers as a timeless warning. Among the bathhouse attendants, the legacy of Vers was complex. Those who had once been pressed into his service carried scars both visible and unseen. Whispers circulated of the abuses they had witnessed and endured, though few dared speak openly. Yet, some former attendants found their experiences unexpectedly valuable. Having served under Vers's demanding eye, they were regarded as experts in managing the more elaborate rituals of the bathhouse. A number secured prestigious positions within Rome's finest thermae, their reputations transformed by the notoriety of their former master. In the political sphere, Cicero's triumph in the prosecution elevated his career, cementing his reputation as a champion of justice. His speeches against Vers were preserved, studied by aspiring advocates for their rhetorical brilliance. Through these works, the story of Vers and his fall continued to shape Roman attitudes toward governance and public morality. The baths themselves, of course, endured. They remained central to Roman life, their allure undiminished by scandal. If anything, the attention brought by the trial only reinforced their importance. To be seen in the baths, to conduct oneself with dignity and restraint, became a marker of one's standing. Over time, the immediate memory of Vers faded, though his name persisted as a cautionary example. New governors came and went. New scandals emerged. But within the marble halls of the bathhouses, the lessons of his downfall lingered, a silent reminder of the fine line between public service and personal excess. As you rest now, picturing those ancient halls and the quiet ripples of history that moved through them, imagine the subtle shifts in behavior, the watchful glances, the renewed emphasis on decorum. The baths, ever a reflection of Rome itself, absorbed these changes, adapting to the currents of time. In our next chapter, we will step back from these grand narratives to explore the more intimate stories etched into the very fabric of the baths, the mosaics and secrets that whisper of lives long past. Chapter 5, Segment 1, Mosaics and Secrets. Beneath the feet of every Roman bather lay a canvas of stone and color, a silent testament to the artistry and storytelling that shaped the world of thermae. The floors of the great Roman baths were not merely functional spaces to walk upon. They were adorned with intricate mosaics, scenes carefully composed from countless tiny tesserae of colored glass, stone, and ceramic. These images, vivid and enduring, conveyed stories both public and private, weaving layers of meaning into the very foundation of the bathhouse. From the moment a patron stepped from the apoderium into the main halls, they encountered these works of art. Some mosaics celebrated the power and grandeur of Rome itself, depicting victorious legions, mythical heroes, or the favor of the gods. Others portrayed more intimate, playful scenes, athletes at sport, nereids and sea creatures, frolicking in the waves, the daily rhythms of Roman life. Each mosaic reflected the values and aspirations of its patrons and artists, shaping the atmosphere of the space. Imagine walking slowly across such a floor, your bare feet tracing patterns of marble and glass. The cool, smooth tesserae shift subtly beneath each step, their designs revealing themselves in glances and pauses. A playful dolphin, its body arcing through stylized waves. A procession of cupids, bearing garlands and amphorae, a solemn bust of Neptune, watching over the waters of the baths. The mosaic served both aesthetic and symbolic purposes. In a culture that valued visual expression and public display, they reinforced the bathhouse's role as a place of refinement and civic pride. At the same time, they conveyed messages to the observant eye. Certain motifs carried deeper meanings. The depiction of marine life, so common in the caldarium and frigidarium, alluded to the purifying power of water. Scenes of athletic prowess underscored the importance of physical vitality. Mythological figures reminded bathers of the divine forces that govern the world. Yet not all mosaics were so straightforward. In private corners of the baths, in alcoves, and lesser-used chambers, one might encounter more enigmatic images. Erotic scenes, rendered with both humor and skill, reflected the bathhouse's association with sensual pleasures. Fragments of text, hidden among the tiles, hinted at personal dedications or inside jokes among the artists and patrons. Some mosaics were designed to amuse or surprise. The sudden appearance of a mischievous satyr peering from behind a column, or a cleverly placed figure gazing back at the viewer, added moments of whimsy to the experience. These touches reminded patrons that the baths were spaces of both relaxation and delight. Over time, certain mosaics became the subjects of gossip and speculation. Regular bathers might interpret particular scenes as veiled references to local scandals or political rays. A depiction of a fox among doves, for example, could be read as a sly comment on a well-known seducer within the community. Such readings, whether intended by the artist or not, added layers of intrigue to the experience of the baths. The artists who created these mosaics were skilled craftsmen, often organized into guilds. Their work required both technical mastery and creative vision. Each piece was meticulously planned, with colored tesserae selected and placed by hand to achieve subtle gradations of tone and texture. The finest mosaics employed perspective and shading to create lifelike images, their surfaces shimmering in the changing light of the baths. In grander bathhouses, wealthy patrons might commission personalized mosaics, embedding their own names or emblems into the designs. These served as lasting marks of status and benefaction, reminders of the patron's generosity and cultural sophistication. The maintenance of these floors was a constant task. Attendants scrubbed them regularly, ensuring that the images remained clear and vibrant despite the heavy foot traffic. Over the years, certain sections would wear thin, the tesserae smoothed by countless steps. Repairs were undertaken with care, though the marks of age remained visible to the discerning eye. For modern archaeologists, these mosaics offer invaluable glimpses into the daily life and social currents of ancient Rome. Their subjects, styles, and inscriptions provide clues to the values, humor, and preoccupations of those who once walked these halls. Many of the most famous bathhouse mosaics have been preserved, their colors still vivid after centuries beneath the earth. As you picture these ancient floors, imagine the countless lives that once moved across them. The sandals of merchants, the bare feet of senators, the playful steps of children. Each tile bears silent witness to a world long vanished, its stories embedded in stone and color. In the next segment, we will delve deeper into the meanings and mysteries of these mosaics, exploring how they reflected and shaped the experiences of those who frequented the baths. As one wandered deeper into the grand complexes of the Roman baths, it became clear that the mosaics beneath each footstep were far more than simple ornamentation. They were a living language, a form of communication between artist and audience. Each panel had been carefully designed, not merely to beautify, but to instruct, to amuse, and, in more subtle ways, to remind patrons of the ideals and values woven into the life of the empire. The most common and instantly recognizable themes were those of the sea. Fish darting between waves, dolphins twisting playfully, myriads reclining on seashells, all evoked the cleansing and transformative nature of water. Such images were particularly abundant in the frigidarium. The cold plunge pools where bathers experienced the bracing final stage of the bathing ritual. Here, the symbolism was rich. The sea, a place of renewal, washing away not only the sweat of the caldarium, but also, metaphorically, the cares of daily life. Yet beyond these obvious motifs, more complex stories unfolded. In certain prestigious bathhouses, the floors were laid with scenes from mythology. The labors of Hercules were popular, a subtle encouragement towards strength and endurance. Depictions of Apollo and the Muses hinted at the intellectual pursuits that often accompanied the bathhouse experience. After all, many thermae included libraries and lecture halls within their walls. Some mosaics seem to comment more directly on the nature of Roman society. In one bathhouse near the Aventine Hill, for example, a detailed scene of the Trojan War sprawled across the floor of a tepidarium. To the casual observer, it was a celebration of heroic deeds. But to the politically attuned, it was a cautionary tale of pride, betrayal, and the tragic costs of war. Such layers of meaning invited contemplation. Patrons reclining upon these images, perhaps after a vigorous exercise in the palestra or soothing massage, would find their thoughts drifting beyond the immediate pleasures of the bath. The tiles beneath their feet became a bridge between the physical and the philosophical, between the mundane and the mythic. Erotic mosaics, though less common in the most public spaces, were a notable feature of more private chambers. In side rooms and secluded alcoves, one might find playful depictions of satyrs and nymphs, of lovers entwined. These images, rendered with humor and artistry, acknowledged the sensual dimensions of bathhouse culture. While the baths were not brothels, they were spaces where the boundaries of decorum were subtly more flexible. Flirtation, liaisons, and discreet encounters were part of the social fabric, and the mosaics reflected this with a knowing wink. Inscriptions embedded in the tiles provided another layer of intrigue. Occasionally, a patron's name might appear, commemorating a donation or celebrating a personal achievement. More tantalizing were the cryptic phrases that sometimes surfaced, enigmatic comments whose meanings have been lost to time. A fragment of text reading simply, "To the victor, all pleasures," found in the caldarium of one bathhouse near the Capitolian Hill, has fueled centuries of speculation. Was it a boast, a dedication, a private joke? The answer remains elusive. The artists themselves left subtle marks within their work. Certain workshops developed signature styles, recognizable in the flow of a dolphin's tail or the curve of a vine. Some mosaics inserted tiny monograms among the tesserae, a quiet assertion of authorship in a world where artisans were often anonymous. These personal touches allowed the discerning patron to commission work from the most esteemed creators, further elevating the status of their chosen bathhouse. The placement of mosaics also carried meaning. Floors in the entryways tended to feature bold, declarative images, symbols of welcome, of civic pride, of the bathhouse's role within the community. In the more intimate spaces, the designs grew subtler, inviting closer inspection. In some of the great imperial baths, entire corridors were laid with narrative sequences, scenes unfolding beneath the feet of patrons as they moved from chamber to chamber. Over time, certain mosaics became landmarks within the baths. Regular visitors might arrange to meet by a particular image, a lion chasing an antelope, a cluster of grapes entwined with ivy. These familiar points of reference lent a comforting rhythm to the experience, weaving the daily act of bathing into the larger tapestry of Roman life. For modern historians and archaeologists, these mosaics provide a treasure trove of insight. Through their subjects and styles, they reveal the shifting tastes of Roman society, the interplay of public and private life, the values held dear by those who commissioned and enjoyed them. And yet, for all that can be discerned, a sense of mystery remains. The full meanings of many mosaics have faded with the centuries, their stories half-heard echoes beneath the stone. As you rest now, picture these intricate images stretching across the ancient floors. Imagine the countless feet that once passed over them, the whispered conversations, the silent contemplations they inspired. In the next chapter, we will rise from these quiet stones to observe another vital aspect of Bathhouse life, the subtle yet powerful world of political discourse that unfolded amid the steam and water as senators and citizens alike engaged in the timeless dance of influence and ambition. Chapter 6, Senators Gossiping Over Steam in the grandest bathhouses of Rome. Amid the swirling steam and echoing chambers, politics was an ever-present undercurrent. To the casual observer, the baths might seem a place of leisure and respite, where citizens of all ranks gathered to cleanse body and mind. Yet beneath the surface, calm, a different kind of business unfolded. For Rome's senators and magistrates, the Thermae served as an extension of the Forum, a space where alliances were forged, rivalries sharpened, and the subtle art of influence played out in gestures and conversation. Imagine the scene. The caldarium, its air thick with warmth and vapor, filled with the low murmur of voices. Here, stripped of the formal garb that marked their status in public life, men of power reclined upon stone benches or stood languidly in the pools. Freed from the weight of togas and the rigid decorum of official gatherings, they engaged in a more fluid form of discourse, one where tone, glance, and timing carried as much meaning as the words themselves. The baths offered unique advantages for such exchanges. The physical proximity, the relaxed atmosphere, the absence of scribes or public observers, all of these fostered a degree of candor rarely possible in the Senate or on the rostra. Matters too delicate for open debate could be broached here with plausible deniability. A chance remark, overheard amid the steam, could plant the seed of a new alliance or sow discord among rivals. The very architecture of the baths encouraged such interactions. Large open halls provided space for general conversation, while smaller alcoves and side pools allowed for more private exchanges. Senators moved between these spaces with practiced ease, navigating the social currents of the Thermae as skillfully as they did those of the political arena. Attendants, well aware of their patrons' preferences, discreetly facilitated these encounters. A favored bench might be kept available at the appointed hour. Certain times of day saw the arrival of particular factions, their members gathering to discuss legislation, appointments, or the shifting fortunes of Rome's distant provinces. The rhythms of the bathhouse mirrored those of the Republic itself, a dynamic interplay of ambition and restraint. Topics of conversation range widely. The latest news from the frontiers, the prospects of a rising young tribune, the machinations of rival families, all found voice amid the steam. Senators traded insights and rumors, tested the waters of public opinion, and gauged the intentions of their peers. In this fluid environment, alliances could shift swiftly. A word spoken in confidence might, by the following day, shape the course of Senate debate. Reputation mattered deeply. A senator known for discretion and measured speech found his standing enhanced, his counsel sought by others. Conversely, one who spoke too freely, whose words spread beyond the baths, risked social isolation and political marginalization. Trust, once lost in these circles, was difficult to regain. For the ambitious, the baths also offered opportunities to cultivate favor among Rome's elite. Younger politicians, or those of lesser rank, sought moments of conversation with established figures, hoping to secure patronage or mentorship. Success in these endeavors required subtlety. Too eager an approach could provoke disdain. Too timid a presence might go unnoticed. The seasoned player understood the nuances of bathhouse etiquette. Conversation often began with pleasantries, comments on the quality of the heat, the merits of the oils, or the latest mosaic in the caldarium. Only once rapport was established might deeper matters be broached. Body language conveyed as much as speech. A nod of assent, a slight shift in posture. A shared glance all served to signal interest or disinterest, agreement or opposition. The baths thus functioned as a kind of unspoken language, a space where the unrecorded history of Rome unfolded daily. Certain bathhouses gained reputations for their political climates. The baths of Agrippa, favored by traditionalists, were known for measured discourse and conservative views. The newer baths of Nero attracted younger, more ambitious men eager to reshape the Republic. The choice of Bathhouse itself sent a message, aligning a senator with particular factions or philosophies. For all this, the baths remained a place of balance. Open confrontation was rare. The norms of the Thurii discouraged overt displays of enmity. Even bitter rivals maintained a veneer of civility within these walls, understanding that the baths belonged to the people as much as to the powerful. To violate this shared space with political rancor was to risk public censure. As you picture the scene, the soft echoes of conversation beneath the vaulted ceilings, the knowing glances exchanged through the mist consider how much of Rome's destiny may have been shaped, not in the formal settings of the forum, but here amid the warmth and shadows of the baths. In the next segment, we will explore further the intricate dynamics of this world, the unspoken rules that govern conduct among the city's elite as they navigated the ever-shifting currents of power and influence. As the afternoon wore on, and the flow of patrons in the baths shifted, the character of conversation within the caldarium and tepidarium evolved. The morning hours had seen merchants and tradesmen, a more boisterous crowd. But now the atmosphere quieted, becoming more measured. Senators, magistrates, and seasoned advocates arrived in greater numbers, their presence transforming the tone of the space. The baths became, for these men of state, an informal arena where the true undercurrents of Roman politics were most keenly felt. Stripped of their insignia, the lines between rank and office blurred slightly within the warmth of the Thermae. Yet each man carried his reputation with him like an invisible cloak. Even here, in a place where senators reclined side by side with equities and wealthy plebeians, the careful observer could read the hierarchy in the deference shown. The tone of greetings exchanged, the subtle choreography of who approached whom. Conversation unfolded in layers. General topics, updates on military campaign, grain shipments from Sicily. The weather served as the opening gambit. Such remarks tested the mood, gauging who might be receptive to deeper discourse. From there, the dialogue might shift delicately to more consequential matters. A whispered inquiry about the progress of a pending piece of legislation. A casual mention of a magistrate's recent travels. A shared observation on the emperor's latest public pronouncements. These exchanges required skill. In the fluid atmosphere of the baths, words could travel faster than intended. The seasoned senator knew when to speak plainly, when to veil his meaning, and when to remain silent. It was said that the most adept could convey an entire strategy with a single raised brow or the manner in which they folded their towel. Among younger aspirants, much was to be learned. They observed their elders closely, noting which men held the ear of influential patrons, which circles formed and reformed with each visit. Securing an invitation to linger with a respected figure after the main bathing rituals concluded was a mark of growing favor. the ability to move comfortably among these groups. To speak without overreaching was as crucial to advancement as any speech delivered in the Senate. The baths themselves offered many settings for such nuanced interaction. The caldarium, with its dense steam and enveloping warmth, favored more private conversations. Voices carried less here, and the physical closeness encouraged a certain intimacy. In the tepidarium, by contrast, the cooler air and more open layout allowed for gatherings of 3 or 4. A small knot of senators engaged in thoughtful debate, their words drifting upward toward the high, vaulted ceilings. Beyond these principal chambers, smaller pools and secluded alcoves provided sanctuaries for particularly delicate discussions. A senator might signal his intent to converse privately by rising and moving toward such a space, pausing subtly to invite a companion to follow. No explicit arrangement was necessary. The language of gesture and timing sufficed. Attendants, sensitive to the rhythms of their patrons, facilitated these interactions with practiced discretion. A favored bench would be readied, a fresh towel provided at just the right moment. Oil would be worn to the preferred temperature, not too hot, not too cool. In such ways, the flow of conversation was supported, the atmosphere conducive to the exchanges of influence and that defined Roman public life. Among the political class, it was well understood that certain matters could only be broached within the baths. Proposals too speculative for the Senate floor, criticisms of powerful figures, even tentative explorations of opposition to imperial policy all found voice here. The baths served as a kind of pressure valve for the Republic, a space where tensions could be aired and alliances formed away from the rigid structures of formal governance. Yet, even within this more fluid setting, caution remained essential. The reputation of being a careless talker could be ruinous. More than one senator had seen his prospects falter due to a poorly judged remark overheard in the tepidarium. Conversely, the ability to cultivate trust within these walls was a hallmark of the most successful statesmen. It was said that to be invited to share a second round of bathing with an elder senator, to remain in quiet discussion as others departed, was a sign of true favor. Such moments, fleeting and unrecorded, often shaped the course of political careers. In the larger context of Roman governance, the baths complemented the formal arenas of power. The forum provided spectacle and rhetoric, the Senate, structure and legality. But within the baths, where steam softened voices and the boundaries of rank were subtly relaxed, the deeper currents of influence flowed most freely. It was here that the alliances of tomorrow were forged, the compromises that would steer legislation agreed upon in principle. As you rest now, envision these chambers filled with quiet murmurings, the rise and fall of voices blending with the gentle splash of water, the warmth of the air wrapping around figures deep in conversation. The baths and their unique blend of leisure and discourse served as both sanctuary and crucible for Rome's political life. In our next chapter, we will shift our focus to a different kind of interaction within the baths, exploring the more personal and often clandestine relationships that unfolded in these storied spaces. Chapter 7, Slave Women and Secret Trysts, within the vast marble embrace of the Roman baths. Where senators schemed and citizens refreshed themselves, another layer of life unfolded, more personal, yet no less significant in the daily rhythm of the Thermae. Beneath the formal exchanges and public rituals lay a world of private encounters. whispered conversations, and secret assignations. The baths, with their labyrinthine layout of grand halls, small chambers, secluded alcoves, and curtained spaces, provided a setting uniquely suited to such interactions. Among the many figures who moved quietly through this world were the slave women of the baths. These women, some owned by the state, others hired from private households or employed by bathhouse managers, played a variety of roles. They served as attendants, masseuses, perfumers, and companions, their presence both practical and ornamental. For many patrons, especially among the elite, the attention of a skilled attendant was an expected part of the experience. These women anointed bathers with fragrant oils, prepared towels and garments, and performed the delicate art of massage. Their work demanded not only physical skill, but a keen awareness of the social nuances that govern the baths. A misplaced glance or an ill-timed remark could have consequences in a world where status and propriety were constantly in play. Yet beyond these formal duties, other, more private exchanges often occurred. The atmosphere of the baths relaxed, intimate, and removed from the rigid structures of Roman public life fostered opportunities for personal connections that would have been difficult to pursue elsewhere. For some slave women, the attentions of powerful patrons could offer a measure of protection or advancement. A favored attendant might receive better quarters, lighter duties, or even the prospect of manumission. Such relationships, though inherently unequal, were part of the complex fabric of Roman social life. Not all encounters were transactional. However, the baths also served as a meeting ground for genuine affection, discreet liaisons, and forbidden love. The mingling of classes and the physical proximity fostered by the bathing rituals created moments where boundaries blurred. A glance exchanged across the tepidarium, a brief touch in the caldarium. These small gestures carried meaning, their potential amplified by the charged atmosphere of the space. Among the younger patrons, the baths were a favored setting for courtship. Freed from the constraints of family supervision and public scrutiny, they found in the steam-filled chambers a rare freedom of interaction. Attendants, well aware of these dynamics, often acted as intermediaries, conveying messages or arranging chance meetings. Certain alcoves within the larger baths became known for their suitability to discreet encounters. Tucked away from the main halls, these spaces provided a measure of privacy for those seeking a quiet conversation or a moment of intimacy. Though officially frowned upon, such activities were tacitly accepted so long as they remained within bounds and did not disrupt the order of the baths. The presence of eunuchs among the bathhouse staff further facilitated this aspect of life. Trusted for their discretion, these attendants often served as go-betweens, ensuring that trysts remained private and that jealous rivals or disapproving magistrates remained unaware. Yet the risks of such encounters were real. A poorly concealed liaison could damage reputations or provoke scandal. Wives of powerful men, jealous rivals, or moralizing censors might seek to expose indiscretions for personal gain. The art of discretion for both patrons and attendants was thus honed to a fine degree. The architecture of the baths themselves mirrored this duality. While grand open spaces celebrated the communal spirit of Roman bathing culture, the abundance of smaller chambers and intricate passageways provided ample opportunity for privacy. Architects, sensitive to the desires of their clientele, designed baths that balanced openness with seclusion. Inscriptions and graffiti found in the ruins of ancient bathhouses hint at this hidden life. Names linked by hearts, ribald jokes, and cryptic phrases suggest a rich tapestry of personal stories, now lost to time. These fleeting moments, secret smiles, whispered promises, once wove through the daily life of the baths, unseen by the casual observer, For modern historians, piecing together this more intimate aspect of the Thermi remains a tantalizing challenge. The official records are silent, but the mosaics, inscriptions, and scattered literary references paint a vivid picture of a world where public ritual and private desire intertwine. As you imagine these ancient halls, consider the countless lives that move through them, not just the great and powerful, but also the nameless attendants, the hopeful lovers, the cautious conspirators. Their stories, though largely unwritten, form an essential part of the history of the Roman baths. In the next segment, we will explore how these personal dynamics were shaped and supported by the thriving trade in perfumes, oils, and bath products, a bustling economy that added yet another layer of richness to the life of the Thermi. The world of intimate encounters within the Roman baths extended beyond fleeting glances and whispered words. For many patrons and attendants alike, these moments of personal connection were woven deeply into the culture of the Thermi. While the grand architecture and public rituals of bathing formed the visible face of Roman leisure, behind that polished facade lay a network of relationships, ambitions, and emotions that found their expression amid the warmth and shadows of the baths. Among the slave women who served within these walls, the bathhouse was both a place of labor and a stage upon which their fortunes could shift in an instant. For those of beauty, wit, or skill, the attention of a wealthy patron offered possibilities beyond the harsh confines of servitude. To catch the eye of a senator in a quest or a prosperous merchant could mean a change in station, improved living conditions, or the rare prospect of freedom. Yet navigating this world required immense caution. The social landscape of the baths was treacherous, a place where envy, rivalry, and resentment simmered beneath the surface. Fellow attendants, protective wives, and jealous patrons could all pose threats to a slave woman who rose too quickly or attracted the wrong kind of notice. Success in this realm demanded not only charm and grace, but also a keen understanding of human nature. Discretion was paramount. The slave women who flourished in this environment were those who mastered the art of reading a room, knowing when to meet a gaze, when to look away, when to linger, and when to retreat. Conversations were conducted in tones soft enough to be missed by the inattentive, gestures honed to convey volumes with the slightest movement. Within the baths, certain times and spaces became associated with particular forms of interaction. The late afternoon, when the crowds thinned and the heat of the day began to wane, offered more opportunities for quieter exchanges. The smaller side rooms of the Tepidarium, away from the main flow of traffic, were favored by those seeking privacy. In these settings, relationships unfolded slowly, shaped by the rhythms of the baths and the unspoken codes that govern conduct within their walls. For patrons of means and ambition, the favor of a particular slave woman could serve multiple purposes. Beyond personal gratification, such connections provided access to information. Attendants moved freely throughout the bathhouse, overhearing conversations, observing interactions, and noting the comings and goings of influential figures. A well-placed question or casual remark could yield valuable insights into the shifting alliances and intrigues of Roman society. Some slave women, aware of the value of such knowledge, cultivated relationships with care, becoming discreet confidants and trusted sources. In a world where information was power, these women held a subtle but potent influence. Their words, though never spoken openly in the forums of Rome, could sway decisions, shape opinions, and alter the course of careers. Of course, such influence came at a cost. The ever-present threat of discovery, of falling afoul of jealous rivals or suspicious patrons, loomed over every interaction. A single misstep could result in punishment, dismissal, or worse, The most successful navigated this world with exceptional skill, balancing the competing demands of discretion, loyalty, and ambition. The complexities of these relationships extended beyond the transactional. Genuine affection, though rare, did emerge in the warmth of the baths. Stories abound of lasting bonds formed between patrons and attendants, of relationships that endured beyond the confines of the thermi. In such cases, the bathhouse served not merely as a backdrop for intrigue, but as the setting for moments of true human connection. Yet for every such story, there were countless others of unfulfilled hopes, of fleeting encounters that ended in disappointment or betrayal. The lives of the slave women of the baths were shaped by uncertainty, their fortunes rising and falling with the tides of favor and the shifting dynamics of Roman society. The physical design of the baths reflected and reinforced these dynamics. The intricate layout of rooms and corridors, the play of light and shadow, the constant movement of patrons and attendants, all created a space of both opportunity and risk. The architecture itself seemed to breathe with the life of its inhabitants, a silent witness to the countless stories that unfolded within its walls. Graffiti found on the remains of ancient baths offers tantalizing glimpses into this hidden world. Scrawled declarations of love, crude jokes, and cryptic messages hint at the passions and intrigues that once animated these spaces. Though the identities of the writers are lost to time, their voices echo faintly across the centuries. Reminders of the enduring human dramas that played out amid the steam and marble. As you reflect on this world, imagine the layers of life that filled the Roman baths. Beneath the public rituals of cleansing and the political maneuverings of senators, a more intimate tapestry unfolds, one of longing, ambition, risk, and occasional joy. In our next chapter, we will turn our attention to the thriving commerce that supported this world, exploring how the trade in perfumes, oils, and bath products shaped the daily experience of the thermi and reflected the broader currents of Roman society. Chapter 8, Perfumes, Oils, and the business of bathing among the many pleasures of the Roman baths. Few were as integral to the experience as the perfumes and oils that accompanied each stage of the ritual. Their scents wafted through the tepidarium and caldarium, mingling with the warmth of the air, becoming part of the very atmosphere of the thermi. To the Roman citizen, bathing was not merely about cleansing the body with water. It was an act of refinement, an expression of taste, and a celebration of the senses. And at the heart of this practice lay an entire industry devoted to producing and selling the oils, unguents, and perfumes that elevated bathing into an art. The market for these products was vast and varied. From the grandest thermi of Rome to the humbler bathhouses of the provinces, merchants offered an array of fragrant goods to suit every preference and budget. Wealthy patrons favored rare and exotic blends, imported from the far reaches of the empire. The oils of Arabia, perfumed with frankincense and myrrh, were highly prized. From Egypt came delicate floral essences. Spain provided rich, earthy scents drawn from native herbs. Each carried with it a subtle message of sophistication and worldliness. The process of selecting oils was itself a ritual. Vendors set up stalls in or near the bathhouse, their wares displayed in elegant glass or ceramic vessels. Patrons would pause on their way to the apoditerium, sampling the scents, weighing the merits of one blend against another. The choice was never casual. To appear in the baths anointed with a fashionable fragrance was to make a statement, to declare one's place within the social tapestry of the city. Certain oils were associated with particular qualities or moods. A sharp, citrus-infused blend might signal vigor and youth. A deeper, musky essence conveyed maturity and gravitas. Floral notes suggested refinement and delicacy. Through scent, the bather shaped the impression he or she made upon others, adding yet another layer to the subtle dynamics of bathhouse life. For the vendors, the competition was fierce. Reputation meant everything. A single poorly crafted blend, a rumor of diluted oils, could ruin a merchant's standing. Success depended not only on the quality of the products, but on personal relationships and the careful cultivation of clientele. Skilled perfumers, often trained in the Eastern traditions of the empire, guarded their formulas jealously. Recipes were passed down through families or held as closely guarded secrets within guilds. The preparation of fine oils required both artistry and technical knowledge. Base oils had to be carefully selected, olive, almond, or more rarely, sesame then, infused with scents through maceration or distillation. The process was time-consuming, demanding patience and precision. The resulting products, when crafted with skill, were as much works of art as the mosaics that adorned the bathhouse floors. Within the baths, attendants played a key role in applying these oils. After the initial stages of bathing, as the pores of the skin were opened by heat and steam, the bather would recline while a trusted attendant massaged the chosen fragrance into the body. The sensation was both soothing and invigorating, the warmth of the skin blending with the richness of the oils. For the elite, this stage of the ritual was not to be rushed. Time and care were lavished upon the process, each stroke of the attendant's hand measured and deliberate. The final effect was a body both cleansed and perfumed, glowing with vitality. Beyond personal enjoyment, the use of fine oils carried social significance. To forego them entirely was to invite whispers of poor taste or declining fortune. To display a knowledge of the latest blends, or to introduce a rare new essence from abroad, marked one as a person of discernment and means. Even the vessels used to store and transport oils became objects of interest. Delicately blown glass flasks, carved ivory containers, and inlaid boxes reflected the wealth and refinement of their owners. Patrons took care in choosing these items, knowing that they too would be observed and commented upon. The business of bathing extended beyond oils to a wider range of products. Scraping tools of fine bronze or silver, towels of the softest linen, combs, and mirrors all contributed to the full expression of the bathing ritual. Artisans and merchants thrived on this demand, their livelihoods intertwined with the daily habits of Rome's citizens. The economic impact of this trade was substantial. The demand for raw materials fueled commerce across the empire. Ships laden with spices, resins, and rare woods sailed from distant ports to meet the insatiable appetite of Rome's bathers. Markets buzzed with activity, deals struck beneath colorful awnings as merchants vied for the best goods. The profits could be considerable, drawing ambitious entrepreneurs into the trade. Some rose to great wealth, their names known in fashionable circles, their patronage sought by both bathhouse managers and discerning clients. Yet the market was volatile. Shifts in taste, changes in imperial favor, disruptions in trade routes, all could swiftly alter fortunes. To survive and prosper required adaptability, keen observation, and a deep understanding of the subtleties of Roman society. As you envision this world of scent and commerce, the bustling stalls, the careful selection of oils, the skilled hands of the attendants, consider how central these elements were to the life of the baths. They shaped not only the sensory experience of bathing, but also the intricate social dynamics that unfolded within these ancient walls. In the next segment, we will delve deeper into the commerce of bathing, exploring how the trade in oils and perfumes reflected broader trends in Roman culture and economy. The business of bathing, woven into the very fabric of Roman life, extended its influence far beyond the walls of the Thermae. The demand for Perfumes, oils, and bath products shaped trade routes, supported entire industries, and reflected the evolving tastes of a cosmopolitan empire. To understand this commerce is to glimpse the larger currents of Roman culture, its aspirations, anxieties, and unceasing appetite for refinement. At the heart of the trade were the perfumers, known as unguennari. These artisans occupied a respected niche within Roman society. Their shops often clustered near the major bathhouses or along the busiest thoroughfares. A successful unguentarius was not merely a merchant, but a connoisseur, attuned to the subtleties of scent and the shifting preferences of an ever-demanding clientele. The selection of raw materials was a global enterprise. Frankincense and myrrh arrived from Arabia, prized for their rich, resinous aromas. Spikenard came from the Himalayas, its earthy fragrance valued for its depth and persistence. Lavender and rosemary were cultivated in Gaul, their clean, refreshing scents popular among those of more restrained taste. Each ingredient carried connotations shaped by geography and tradition. To wear a blend redolent of the East suggested sophistication and wealth, a worldly embrace of empire. A preference for more austere, local scents might signal republican virtue or a conscious rejection of excess. These nuances were understood by those who moved within the upper echelons of Roman society. The blending of perfumes required skill and experience. Base oils had to be perfectly balanced to carry the desired notes without overpowering them. The infusion process demanded patience. Too swift an extraction yielded thin, fleeting scents, while too long a soak muddled the composition. Master perfumers guarded their methods closely, their reputations built on consistency and innovation alike. Among their clientele, loyalty was fiercely maintained. A noble family might patronize the same unguentarius for generations, their chosen blend becoming part of their household identity. New patrons sought introductions carefully, for to change perfumers was to make a social statement. Beyond the elite, the market for oils extended to the broader citizenry. Modest blends, crafted from more readily available herbs and flowers, catered to the aspirations of the middle classes. Though less costly, these products still carried the cachet of participation in the rituals of Roman refinement. Even the humblest bather might save to purchase a small vial of scented oil, an investment in both personal pleasure and social appearance. The scale of this commerce was immense. Workshops bustled with activity, apprentices learning the art as they prepared shipments for distribution. Caravans and ships bore their precious cargoes across the empire, from the bazaars of the east to the markets of Catania. The flow of goods linked distant provinces to the daily life of Rome, each drop of oil a testament to the empire's vast reach. The bathhouses themselves played a central role in sustaining this trade. Managers and owners cultivated relationships with favorite perfumers, ensuring a steady supply of the finest products. Exclusive arrangements were not uncommon. A particular blend offered only within a certain thermi, drawing patrons eager to associate themselves with the latest trend. Attendants, too, became part of the commerce. Their recommendations carried weight, a whispered endorsement shaping the choices of their charges. Some received commissions from the vendors, subtly steering clients toward particular products. The economics of the bathhouse thus extended far beyond the collection of entrance fees. It was a hub of commercial activity, a space where luxury and necessity intersected. The business of bathing influenced fashion, shaped public taste, and provided livelihoods for countless artisans and merchants. It also reflected the evolving identity of Rome itself. As the empire expanded and its population grew more diverse, so too did the offerings of the perfumers. New scents, new blends, new influences entered the market, mirroring the dynamic, multicultural character of Roman life. Yet, even amid this flux, certain constants endured. The importance of personal presentation, the value placed on sensory experience. The subtle language of Santal remained central to the Roman conception of self and society. The act of bathing was both public and personal, a daily reaffirmation of one's place within the complex web of Roman culture. To emerge from the baths anointed with a chosen fragrance was to carry with oneself a message, spoken not in words but in the language of the senses. As you rest now, imagine the bustling stalls, the careful preparation of oils, the quiet pride of the perfumer unveiling a new blend. Picture the patrons, each choice of scent a reflection of their aspirations and identity. In our next chapter, we will turn from these pleasures to the darker currents that sometimes disturb the tranquility of the bath, exploring how these spaces, for all their elegance, could also become arenas of conflict and confrontation. Chapter 9. When bathhouses became battlegrounds, the Roman baths, for all their elegance and ritualized grace, were not immune to the more volatile aspects of urban life. Though intended as spaces of communal harmony, where citizens of all ranks could mingle in an atmosphere of refinement, the thermi sometimes bore witness to moments of tension and outright violence. Beneath the polished marble and perfumed air, the same human passions that animated the streets of Rome found their expression. The grand scale of the larger bathhouses, with their labyrinth of halls and chambers, contributed to this dynamic. The sheer number of patrons who passed through the doors each day created an environment ripe for friction. In a bustling city where rival factions vied for influence, where personal grudges simmered and political tensions ran high, it was inevitable that conflicts would, on occasion, erupt even in these sanctuaries of leisure. Factional rivalries provided one of the more common sparks for discord among the youth of Rome. The various sporting factions, those who supported different chariot teams or gladiatorial schools, often brought their competitive fervor into the baths. Heated arguments over the merits of a particular driver or the outcome of a match could quickly escalate from verbal sparring to physical confrontation. The presence of alcohol, frequently consumed during extended visits to the thermi, further inflamed tempers. A few too many cups of spiced wine could strip away the veneer of civility, turning a jovial gathering into a brawl. The confined spaces of certain rooms, particularly the smaller pools and private alcoves, offered ample opportunity for tempers to boil over unchecked. Personal disputes also played their part. The baths, with their relaxed atmosphere and mingling of classes, sometimes brought old grudges into close proximity. Feuds between families, disputes over business, or matters of the heart could surface amid the steam and shadows. A perceived slight, a glance held too long, an offhand remark might serve as the spark that ignited a violent encounter. Such incidents, though generally frowned upon, were not uncommon. The records of Rome's urban magistrates contain numerous accounts of altercations within the baths. Fines and penalties were imposed, though enforcement varied depending on the status of those involved. For the wealthy and well-connected, a scuffle in the thermi might result in little more than a discreet warning. For those of lower standing, the consequences could be far harsher. The architecture of the baths, while designed to promote harmony, inadvertently facilitated conflict. The many corridors and secluded corners offered spaces where disputes could unfold away from the watchful eyes of attendants. Though guards were sometimes stationed within the larger complexes, their presence alone could not prevent every incident. Moreover, certain baths gained reputations as more volatile than others. The older, more established thermi, frequented by Rome's elite, maintained stricter codes of conduct. But in the newer, more popular baths, those catering to a broader swath of the populace, the likelihood of encountering trouble was greater. The baths of Titus, for example, though renowned for their innovative design, were also known as a gathering place for younger, more boisterous patrons. On festival days, when the crowd swelled and the mood turned celebratory, the risk of disorder grew markedly. The authorities, aware of these dynamics, occasionally imposed restrictions during such times, limiting access to certain baths or increasing the presence of guards. Yet these measures could only do so much. The volatile nature of Roman urban life seeped into every corner of the city, the baths included. Even within these temples of relaxation, the ever-present undercurrents of rivalry and ambition found expression. At times, the consequences extended beyond personal injury. A particularly violent incident might lead to damage of the bathhouse itself, overturned benches, shattered lamps, even defaced mosaics. Such events were a source of considerable concern for bathhouse managers, whose reputations depended on maintaining an atmosphere of refinement. The cost of repairs and the risk to clientele could not be ignored. In response, some bathhouses employed discreet informants among their staff. Attendants tasked with observing potential sources of trouble and alerting the authorities, or intervening subtly to diffuse tensions. These efforts met with varying degrees of success. The volatile mix of personalities that filled the baths each day could not always be managed so easily. Despite these occasional eruptions, the baths remained a vital part of Roman life. Their social and cultural importance outweighed the risks. Most patrons, aware of the potential for conflict, navigated the space with care, mindful of etiquette, and attuned to the moods of those around them. In the next segment, we will continue exploring this theme, examining how the baths serve not only as sites of occasional violence, but also as stages for the broader political and social dramas that played out in the life of the city. When bathhouses became battlegrounds, when conflict did arise within the Roman baths, it was rarely an isolated event. The interconnected nature of Roman society meant that altercations within these spaces often echoed beyond their marble walls, reverberating through families, neighborhoods, and even the Senate itself. The baths, in their dual role as both public institutions and private refuges, served as mirrors for the broader tensions of the city. And when those tensions spilled into violence, the consequences could be far-reaching. Political factions used the baths as arenas for both subtle influence and overt confrontation. In a city where patronage networks shaped every aspect of life, the baths offered an invaluable venue for displaying loyalty and solidarity. It was not uncommon for a senator or wealthy patron to be accompanied to the thermae by an entourage of clients and supporters, their presence a visible sign of influence. Rival factions often chose different times or even different bathhouses to avoid direct clashes, but such efforts were not always successful. The mingling of diverse groups, each with its own interests and alliances, inevitably led to friction. A casual insult, whether intentional or not, could spark a confrontation that quickly escalated beyond the control of the bathhouse attendants. Once tempers flared, the confines of the baths often exacerbated the situation. The architecture that encouraged relaxation and private conversation also created pockets where violence could erupt unchecked. A narrow corridor, a secluded alcove, even the edge of a crowded pool could become the site of a sudden brawl. Fists flew, oil-slick bodies grappled, and the cries of combatants echoed through the steam-filled air. The presence of slaves, both as attendants and personal servants, further complicated matters. Loyal to their masters, these individuals could be drawn into disputes, either to defend or to retaliate. What began as a quarrel between two men might rapidly escalate into a broader melee with multiple participants and numerous injuries. The legal ramifications of such incidents were significant. Roman law prohibited violence within public spaces, and the baths were no exception. However, enforcement of these laws was uneven. The social standing of those involved played a crucial role in determining outcomes. A brawl involving minor citizens might lead to swift punishment, fines, public censure, even temporary exclusion from the baths. But when senators or prominent equities were involved, matters grew more delicate. The authorities often sought to resolve such disputes quietly, to avoid scandal or political fallout. Magistrates might mediate between factions, encouraging public reconciliations and private reparations. In some cases, incidents within the baths provided ammunition for political opponents. A senator known for intemperate behavior, or whose clients were notorious for causing disturbances, risked damaging his reputation. In a society where personal virtue was closely tied to public standing, even whispered rumors of bathhouse misconduct could erode one's influence. The baths thus function not only as physical battlegrounds, but as stages upon which reputations rose or fell. Savvy politicians understood this dynamic well. They cultivated an image of decorum within the thermae, ensuring that their conduct and that of their associates reflected the dignity expected of their station. The ability to navigate the complex social currents of the baths without incident was seen as a mark of character and self-control. Yet not all conflicts stemmed from political or factional rivalries. Personal enmities, romantic jealousies, and even simple misunderstandings could ignite tempers. The close quarters of the baths, where privacy was limited and interactions constant, provided ample opportunity for such tensions to surface. Attendants, often the first to sense trouble, developed an acute awareness of the moods of patrons. A tense exchange of glances, a pointed remark, a sudden shift in body language, these signs warned of impending conflict. Experienced attendants might intervene subtly, redirecting conversation, adjusting the flow of patrons through the space, or alerting more senior staff. Despite these efforts, violence could not always be prevented. When it did occur, the baths themselves bore the scars. Broken benches, cracked tiles, and stained mosaics testified to moments when civility gave way to chaos. Repairs followed swiftly, for the reputation of a bathhouse depended on its appearance as much as its amenities. Yet, the memory of such incidents lingered, shaping the perceptions of patrons and influencing future behavior. Over time, certain baths gained reputations as either refined havens of tranquility or rowdy arenas prone to conflict. Patrons chose their venues accordingly, aligning themselves with the atmosphere that best suited their temperament and social ambitions. As you rest now, consider how these ancient spaces, dedicated to the ideals of health and leisure, also reflected the deeper currents of Roman life, the ambitions, rivalries, and passions that shaped the empire. In our next chapter, we will explore how these currents found more subtle expression, as the baths became a political stage where appearances mattered as much as actions, and where the art of being seen often carried as much weight as the spoken word. Chapter 10, The Baths as Political Stage in the Heart of Rome, where power was measured not only by what one did, but by how one was seen to do it. The baths occupied a unique position. Far more than spaces for cleansing and relaxation, they served as vital theaters of social performance, where the careful orchestration of appearance and association shaped reputations and reinforced hierarchies. For Rome's elite, to be seen in the right bathhouse at the right hour, among the right company, was as critical to one standing as any speech delivered in the Senate or triumph celebrated on the streets. The architecture of their grand thermae reflected and facilitated this performative aspect. Vast, columned entryways framed the arrival of each patron, allowing their entrance to be noted by all. Within the halls, sightlines were carefully considered. Open spaces encouraged mingling, while balconies and galleries offered vantage points from which to observe. The progression through the baths became, in effect, a public procession. Patrons moved from the amphitheatrium to the palestra, then through the tepidarium and caldarium, each stage offering opportunities for interaction, observation, and the subtle dance of status. Clothing, or the lack thereof, played a complex role in this performance. Stripped of their togas and formal attire, patrons appeared in simple garments or unclothed, their physical condition laid bare. In a culture that valued the disciplined, athletic body as a mark of virtue and civic worth, one's appearance in the baths was scrutinized closely. A well-maintained physique suggested strength, discipline, and moral fiber. A neglected or indulgent figure risked whispers of weakness or decadence. The choice of oils and perfumes, the quality of one's grooming, even the elegance of one's towels and personal attendants, all contributed to the unspoken dialogue of Thermi. For senators and magistrates, the baths provided a rare opportunity to project an image of approachable authority. Here, among citizens of all ranks, they could demonstrate magnanimity, engaging in casual conversation with lesser men, listening to concerns, offering a kind word or subtle promise. Such gestures, carefully calibrated, built goodwill and reinforced the senator's standing as a man of the people. Conversely, to appear aloof, to snub or ignore, risked eroding support. The baths thus required a delicate balance. The powerful must be seen to engage without diminishing their dignity. Among the equestrian class, the Thermi offered opportunities for advancement. By cultivating associations with senators, demonstrating refined tastes, and displaying the virtues of moderation and discipline, an equess might elevate his social standing and attract influential patrons. The timing of one's visits also conveyed meaning. The morning hours, dominated by tradesmen and minor officials, were avoided by those of higher rank. The late afternoon, when the elite gathered, provided the ideal stage for more significant performances. To be absent from the baths during these peak hours might prompt speculation. Was one ill, out of favor, or embroiled in some private scandal? Conversely, a return to the baths after an absence appearing fit, serene, and in good company signaled resilience and restored standing. Particular bathhouses developed distinct social profiles. The baths of Agrippa, favored by conservative senators, projected an air of tradition and restraint. The newer baths of Caracalla, with their vast scale and opulent decor, attracted a younger, more ambitious crowd. Patrons chose their venues with care, aligning their presence with the political and cultural currents they wished to reflect. Within these spaces, alliances were reinforced and rivalries observed. A senator seen in close conversation with a rising tribune might prompt speculation about future political alignments. The grouping of patrons who bathed with whom was seen entering or departing together formed a subtle but potent language of association. Attendants, well aware of these dynamics, played their part. A favored attendant might ensure that a senator's entrance was noted by key figures or that a discreet conversation proceeded without interruption. The staff of the baths thus became participants in the ongoing drama, their loyalties and perceptions shaping the flow of events. The stakes of this performance were real. In a society where reputation was everything, the impressions formed within the baths could influence votes, appointments, and alliances. A senator's conduct here might bolster his standing before a critical debate or undermine his authority at a moment of crisis. Rumors born in the steam of caldarium often found their way to the Senate floor. Their origins obscured, but their effects undeniable. Yet for all this, the baths remain spaces of balance. The norms of decorum tempered excess and preserved the fundamental civility of the environment. Open displays of ambition were frowned upon. The most successful performers were those whose actions seemed effortless, whose conversations appeared casual even as they shaped the currents of power. As you imagine these grand halls filled with the murmur of voices, the gleam of marble, and the shifting play of light and steam, consider the countless unspoken dramas that unfolded here each day. The baths, in their unique blend of public and private space, served as a crucible for Rome's political life, shaping the destinies of men and the fortunes of the city itself. In the next segment, we will continue exploring this theme, delving deeper into the ways in which appearance and association within the baths influence the intricate dance of Roman society. As the afternoon shadows lengthened across the city and the flow of bathers reached its height, the baths revealed themselves most clearly as the political stages they had quietly become. The mingling of citizens within these marble halls, stripped of the formal trappings of rank but acutely aware of the unspoken hierarchies at play, gave rise to a complex dance of social navigation where every glance, gesture, and word carried potential weight. Patrons of high standing understood that the baths were no less public than the forum, even if the atmosphere was more intimate. They moved through the space with practiced ease, aware of the eyes upon them. A senator might enter with deliberate informality, greeting familiar faces with warmth, projecting an image of accessibility and civic virtue. Or he might maintain a more reserved presence, his few words carefully chosen to reinforce an aura of gravitas and dignity. The choice of companions spoke volumes. To bathe in the company of a rising political star signaled alignment and endorsement. To avoid association with a controversial figure demonstrated caution or disapproval. These subtle cues did not go unnoticed. Among Rome's politically attuned citizenry, such observations were discussed, dissected, and passed along with a speed that rivaled any formal news. Even the sequence of movement through the baths carried meaning. Some chose to linger in the palestra, their participation in vigorous exercise underscoring their vitality and self-discipline. Others might move swiftly through the more public chambers to seek quieter conversations in secluded alcoves, suggesting a preference for discretion over display. The art lay in balancing visibility with restraint, making oneself known without appearing to seek attention overtly. Among the younger men of the equestrian and senatorial orders, the baths offered a proving ground. Here, they honed the skills of subtle self-presentation that would serve them throughout their careers. The choice of oils, the quality of personal grooming, the manner of greeting one's peers, all were carefully observed by potential patrons and rivals alike. Success in this arena could lead to new alliances, invitations to influential circles, and the quiet advancement of one's ambitions. The attendants played a vital role in facilitating these dynamics. Experienced capsari and masseurs knew which clients preferred to be observed and which valued privacy. They guided patrons to favorite spots, timed the presentation of towels and oils to enhance their client's image, and managed the flow of interaction with practiced subtlety. A well-timed introduction, a discreet word to another attendant, these small acts could shift the currents of conversation and opportunity. The bathhouse managers themselves cultivated relationships with key figures, ensuring that their establishment maintained its status as a preferred venue for the city's elite. Competition among the baths was fierce. To attract the right clientele required constant attention to detail, maintaining the highest standards of cleanliness. Securing the finest oils, commissioning new mosaics and decorations to refresh the visual appeal. Reputation was everything. A bathhouse known for attracting influential patrons would draw more of the same. creating a self-reinforcing cycle of prestige. Conversely, a single scandal, a public brawl, an indiscretion too widely reported could tarnish a Bede's standing for months or even years. Political strategists understood the importance of these venues. Decisions were sometimes made with an eye to how they would be perceived within the baths. A senator might time the announcement of a new alliance or policy stance to coincide with his presence in the thermi, ensuring that the ensuing conversations would shape public perception in his favor. News traveled swiftly through these social channels, often reaching the broader public in ways more effective than formal declarations. For all its informal nature, the political stage of the baths demanded constant awareness and adaptability. The shifting tides of favor, the emergence of new players, the subtle movements of rivals all required careful observation. To misstep here was to risk not only personal embarrassment, but tangible political consequences. Yet the baths also offered opportunities for reconciliation and bridge building. The relaxed atmosphere provided a setting in which old enmities might be eased, misunderstandings clarified, new accords quietly forged. The simple act of sharing space in the baths could signal a willingness to move beyond past conflicts, laying the groundwork for future cooperation. In this way, the baths functioned not only as stages of rivalry, but as arenas for the maintenance of the delicate balance that sustained Roman public life. As you reflect on these ancient halls, their marble surfaces gleaming in the softened light, the gentle murmur of voices blending with the sounds of water, imagine the countless small dramas that unfolded here each day. The baths, in their unique blend of leisure and performance, served as crucibles of reputation and influence, shaping the fortunes of men and the destiny of the city. In our next chapter, we will turn our gaze upward and outward, exploring the architectural marvels of the Roman baths and the engineering genius that made these remarkable spaces possible. Chapter 11: The architecture of awe-engineering Roman baths. To walk into one of the great Roman bathhouses was to step into a space designed not only for cleansing and leisure, but for awe. The vast scale, the harmonious proportions, the sheer ingenuity of construction all combined to elevate the experience beyond the merely physical. The baths were, in their way, temples of civic pride, monuments to the power and sophistication of the Roman state. For the engineers and architects who designed them, each new project was an opportunity to surpass what had come before, to demonstrate the mastery of Roman technology and the cultural ideals it embodied. At the heart of this achievement lay the Roman mastery of concrete, or opus cementitium. This versatile material, combined with brick and stone, allowed for the creation of structures that would have been impossible using traditional post and lintel construction. Massive vaulted ceilings soared overhead, their weight borne effortlessly by thick walls and cleverly designed arches. The use of concrete freed architects to create vast open spaces, unbroken by columns, where light could pour in through high clerestory windows. The scale of these rooms was intended to impress. To step into a caldarium whose dome ceiling rose dozens of feet above the pool below was to feel the grandeur of Rome made manifest in stone and light. The spatial experience was carefully orchestrated. Visitors moved through a sequence of chambers that varied in scale, proportion, and atmosphere. From the bustling activity of the palestra, with its open sky and echoing walls, one passed into the more enclosed warmth of the tepidarium. The caldarium, with its dense steam and glowing marble, provided a dramatic contrast. Finally, the cool tranquility of the frigidarium offered a space of calm reflection. Each transition was designed to heighten the sensory experience, reinforcing the feeling of a journey through a sacred space of transformation. Heating these vast complexes required remarkable engineering. The hypocaust system, a network of raised floors supported by brick pillars, allowed hot air from wood-fired furnaces to circulate beneath the rooms, warming the marble surfaces from below. Flues built into the walls carried heat upward, ensuring an even distribution. The system was flexible and efficient, allowing bathhouse attendants to regulate the temperature of each room with considerable precision. The aqueducts that supplied the baths with fresh water were equally impressive. Rome's engineers had mastered the art of transporting water over great distances, using gravity-fed channels that maintained a steady flow across hills and valleys. The baths of Caracal, for example, drew their supply from the Aqua Marcia, one of the longest and purest of Rome's aqueducts. Within the bathhouse, complex plumbing networks distributed this water to pools, fountains, and basins, maintaining the constant flow essential to the bath's operation. Drainage systems, often overlooked, were no less sophisticated. Carefully graded floors and hidden channels ensured that used water was swiftly removed, preventing stagnation and maintaining hygiene. Maintenance of these systems was a constant task, carried out by teams of skilled laborers whose work ensured the smooth functioning of the baths. The materials chosen for construction reflected both durability and beauty. Marble from across the empire adorned the walls and floors. Egyptian granite, Numidian yellow, Phrygian purple, all found their place in the Grandis Thermae. The shimmering surfaces of these stones, polished to a high sheen, caught and reflected the ever-changing light. Bronze fittings, gilded statuary, and intricate mosaics added further richness. The baths were spaces where engineering met artistry, where utility and aesthetics were inseparably intertwined. Beyond their physical structure, the baths also embodied the Roman ideals of order and harmony. Their symmetrical layouts, carefully proportioned spaces, and measured progression mirrored the values of the culture that created them. The experience of moving through the baths was as much about aligning oneself with these ideals as it was about cleansing the body. The architects who designed the great Thermae understood this deeply. Figures like Apollodorus of Damascus, whose influence shaped many of Rome's public buildings, approached their work with a sense of civic mission. The baths were to be places where citizens could experience the greatness of Rome in their daily lives, where the power of the empire was made tangible in stone and water. For the modern visitor, the ruins of these baths still convey something of that original vision. The towering walls, the fragments of mosaic, the echoing spaces all speak to a scale of ambition and achievement that continues to inspire awe. As you rest now, imagine these ancient halls in their full glory. Picture the play of light on polished marble, the gentle murmur of water flowing through sculpted channels, the warmth of the air caressing the skin. In our next segment, we will delve deeper into the ingenuity of Roman engineering, exploring how the innovations of the baths influence other aspects of architecture and daily life throughout the empire. Chapter 11, The Architecture of Awe, Engineering Roman Baths. The innovations that shaped the Roman baths extended far beyond the confines of the Thermae themselves, influencing the broader development of Roman architecture and urban life. The techniques perfected in the service of bathing vaulted ceilings, hypocaust heating, complex plumbing were adapted for use in villas, basilicas, and temples, transforming the built environment of the empire. Central to this architectural revolution was the mastery of the arch and the dome. Roman engineers, building on earlier knowledge, refined these forms to an unprecedented degree. The use of concrete allowed for the creation of structures that were both massive and elegant, combining strength with grace. The great domes of the baths, with their soaring spans and harmonious proportions, became a signature of Roman public architecture. These engineering triumphs were not merely aesthetic. They solved practical problems, creating vast, unobstructed spaces that could accommodate large numbers of people while maintaining a sense of openness and grandeur. The baths of Caracalla, for example, could host thousands of patrons at once, yet the experience remained one of measured movement and dignified procession, thanks to the careful modulation of space and light. The lessons learned in designing these spaces soon found application elsewhere. Basilicas, the great public halls of Roman civic life, adopted the soaring vaults and rhythmic colonnades of the baths. Temples and imperial palaces incorporated advanced heating systems, allowing for comfort even in the cooler months. Private villas of the wealthy emulated the aesthetic of the Thermae, their baths and reception rooms adorned with similar materials and forms. The influence of bath architecture also extended into the realm of urban planning. The need to supply the baths with vast quantities of water drove the expansion of aqueduct networks. These monumental structures, with their elegant arches marching across the landscape, became enduring symbols of Roman engineering prowess. Their presence transformed the cities they served, enabling not only the operation of the baths, but the flourishing of fountains, public gardens, and private homes. The integration of complex plumbing systems into the baths encouraged broader innovations in sanitation and water management. Techniques developed to control the flow and temperature of water in the Thermae were adapted for use in other public and private contexts. The idea of controlling the environment, of shaping air, light, and moisture to enhance human comfort found expression in the design of atria, peristyles, and other architectural forms. The hypocaust, originally devised to heat the baths, was refined and adapted for residential use. Wealthy Romans installed versions of this system in their homes, creating heated floors and walls that extended the luxuries of the Thermae into private life. The cultural impact of this technology was profound, reinforcing ideals of comfort, sophistication, and the harmonious integration of human and natural elements. The artistry of the baths likewise set standards for decoration throughout the empire. The mosaics, frescoes, and sculptural programs that adorned the Thermae inspired similar works in other public buildings and private residences. Themes of nature, mythology, and civic virtue found expression across a wide range of media, shaping the visual language of Roman culture. The role of the architect evolved in response to these developments. No longer mere builders, architects became visionaries, charged with creating spaces that embodied the ideals of Rome. Their work was celebrated in inscriptions and dedications, their reputations crossing the boundaries of cities and provinces. Figures such as Verus and Celer, who designed parts of the baths of Nero, or the anonymous masters behind later imperial projects, were revered for their ability to marry form and function in the service of civic life. The impact of these achievements extended beyond the empire's borders. As Roman influence, so too did its architectural innovations. In the provinces, local builders adapted Roman techniques to local materials, creating hybrid forms that reflected both imperial power and regional identity. From the grand Thermae of Gaul to the modest baths of distant Britannia, the language of Roman architecture spoke to the unity and diversity of the empire. Even after the fall of Rome, the legacy of its bath architecture endured. Medieval builders drew upon Roman vaulting techniques in the construction of cathedrals and castles. Renaissance architects rediscovered the principles of proportion and harmony that had shaped the Thermae. The domes of Florence and St. Peter's traced their lineage in part to the great vaulted spaces of the Roman baths. For modern visitors, the ruins of these structures continue to inspire awe. Standing beneath a fragment of a once mighty dome, tracing the outlines of a mosaic floor, one can still feel the power of Roman vision and craftsmanship. These were not mere functional spaces, but embodiments of a worldview that valued order, beauty, and the capacity of human ingenuity to shape the environment. As you imagine these ancient spaces, their columns rising toward the sky, their surfaces alive with light and color, consider the minds that conceived them and the hands that brought them into being. The baths, in their architecture and engineering, remain among the most enduring testaments to the genius of Rome. In our next chapter, we will turn our attention to the cultural ideals reflected in these spaces, exploring how the Roman conception of the body, beauty, and physical fitness found expression within the rituals of the Thermae. Chapter 12, Bathing and the Roman Body Ideal. To step into a Roman bathhouse was to enter a world where the human body was both celebrated and scrutinized. The rituals of the Thermae were not simply acts of hygiene or leisure, but reflections of deeper cultural values that shaped how Romans perceived themselves and one another. Within these marble halls, ideals of beauty, fitness, and physical discipline were made visible, reinforced through practice and observation. The Roman conception of the body was rooted in notions of balance, proportion, and self-control. Influenced by Greek philosophy and art, Romans valued a physique that embodied both strength and harmony. The ideal male body was lean, muscular, and well-proportioned, a testament to disciplined living and moral character. For women, beauty was measured in softer contours, graceful movement, and the appearance of health and vitality. The baths provided a daily stage upon which these ideals were performed and judged. Stripped of clothing and the outward symbols of rank, patrons were revealed in their natural form. Every line of muscle, every curve, every blemish was exposed to the gaze of others. In this setting, physical appearance carried social weight. A well-maintained body suggested not only personal virtue, but also oneness placed within the broader order of society. The connection between physical fitness and moral worth was deeply ingrained. Philosophers wrote of the disciplined body as a reflection of the disciplined mind. A senator whose frame showed signs of neglect might be viewed as lacking the vigor and self-mastery expected of a leader. Conversely, a merchant whose physique mirrored the ideals of Roman manhood could elevate his standing among peers. The practices of the baths supported these values. The progression from the palestra, where physical exercise was performed, to the caldarium and frigidarium, where the body was cleansed and refreshed, mirrored the philosophical journey from effort to harmony. Each stage reinforced the connection between physical exertion and inner balance. Exercise within the palestra was not undertaken lightly. Patrons engaged in a variety of activities, wrestling, weight training, ball games that tested endurance, agility, and strength. The rhythmic repetition of these movements, set against the backdrop of colonnaded courtyards, created a ritual of physical refinement. The sounds of effort, the slap of flesh on sand, the grunts of exertion formed a kind of music, underscoring the communal nature of the endeavor. Observers took note. To excel in the palestra was to demonstrate qualities admired by Roman society: determination, competitiveness, resilience. Victories, even in friendly contests, were remembered and recounted. Failures, too, left their mark, shaping perceptions and influencing future interactions. Beyond the formal exercises, the baths fostered a culture of bodily awareness. Attendants skilled in massage and grooming worked to enhance the appearance of their patrons. The careful application of oils highlighted muscle tone and smoothed the skin. Techniques for improving posture and movement were shared and refined. The body became a canvas upon which personal identity was expressed and social aspirations projected. Cosmetics played a role as well. Though more commonly associated with women, certain products were used by men to conceal blemishes, even skin tone, or enhance features. These practices, while subject to debate among moralists, reflected the centrality of appearance in Roman life. The baths offered a space where such efforts could be observed and appreciated. Standards of beauty, of course, were not static. They shifted with the currents of taste and the influence of prominent figures. The athletic ideals of the Republican era gave way, in certain circles, to a preference for softer forms during the empire. The statues that adorned the baths provided constant reference points, their sculpted bodies embodying the prevailing aesthetic. Patrons could not help but measure themselves against these idealized forms. For many, the pursuit of bodily perfection became a lifelong endeavor. The baths served as both arena and mirror for this quest, offering daily feedback through the eyes of others. Compliments, subtle or overt, reinforced success. Unspoken glances conveyed critique. In this dynamic interplay, the body was both subject and object, shaped by personal effort and collective expectation. The role of women in this culture was more complex. Though public bathing for women existed, the customs and settings varied. In some cities, women had separate hours or facilities. In others, mingling occurred. Here, too, appearance was scrutinized and beauty carried social currency. The baths provided a rare space where women could cultivate and display their physical selves, engaging in rituals of grooming and relaxation that affirmed their place within the social fabric. The emphasis on physical appearance extended beyond the baths into all aspects of Roman life. Statues, coins, and frescoes celebrated the ideal body. Public ceremonies and private gatherings reinforced the link between appearance and status. The baths were thus both a reflection of and a contributor to this broader cultural preoccupation. As you imagine these ancient spaces, alive with movement and form, consider how deeply the ideals of the body shaped Roman identity. Within the warmth of the thermae, the rhythms of exercise, cleansing, and display wove together to create a culture where the pursuit of physical perfection was inseparable from the fabric of civic life. In the next segment, we will explore how these ideals influence not only personal appearance, but the very rhythms of Roman society, shaping interactions and expectations across the empire. Bathing in the Roman body ideal, the cultivation of the body within the Roman baths, extended far beyond mere aesthetics. It intertwined with values of discipline, civic virtue, and social responsibility, shaping not only how individuals perceived themselves, but also how they moved through the broader fabric of Roman life. The ideals embodied in the thermae influenced behavior in public and private spheres alike, reinforcing a culture where personal presentation was inseparable from one's role in society. The Roman day was structured in part around the rhythms of the bathhouse. For many citizens, a visit to the thermae marked the transition from the morning's labors to the more social and political activities of the afternoon. The preparation of the body through exercise, cleansing, and grooming was seen as essential groundwork for effective participation in civic life. To appear in the Forum or the Senate without first passing through the baths would have been unthinkable for a man of ambition. This daily ritual reinforced the connection between physical readiness and public responsibility. The polished appearance of a bather emerging from the thermae skin, glowing with health. Muscles limber and defined projected an image of competence and vigor that carried weight in all subsequent interactions. In a culture that prized action and achievement, the disciplined body was both a symbol and a tool of success. The values cultivated in the baths found expression in other domains as well. Military training mirrored the structured exercises of the palestra, emphasizing endurance, strength, and agility. The ideal of the soldier citizen, so central to Roman identity, was rooted in this shared physical culture. Even in arts, representations of the human form drew upon the ideals perpetuated within the baths. Sculptures, frescoes, and coin portraits celebrated bodies that reflected balance, control, and vitality. The portrayal of emperors often emphasized their physical fitness, reinforcing the link between personal excellence and the capacity to lead. The social dynamics of the baths further shaped these ideals. The constant presence of others, the shared experience of exposure and comparison, created a culture of accountability. Friends and rivals alike observed one another's progress or decline, their judgments conveyed through subtle cues. Compliments and criticisms alike served as motivators, encouraging continual self-improvement. This culture extended to diet and lifestyle. Patrons of the baths were mindful of their eating and drinking habits, aware that excess would soon be visible to all. Discussions of health and regimen were common topics within the thermae, with advice on everything from herbal supplements to sleep patterns exchanged alongside more casual gossip. Physicians and trainers found a ready clientele among those eager to refine their physiques and maintain their standing within the Bathhouse community. The pursuit of the ideal body also intersected with the realm of fashion. The choice of garments worn to and from the baths, the style of hair and beard, the selection of jewelry or scent all contributed to the overall presentation of the self. These elements were carefully curated to complement the physical form, creating a harmonious image that reflected both personal taste and social awareness. For women, the cultivation of beauty within the baths was equally significant. Though their access to public bathing spaces varied by time and place, where permitted, these venues served as important sites of social interaction and self-fashioning. The rituals of bathing and grooming were occasions for the display of elegance and refinement, as well as for the exchange of news and the negotiation of social relationships. The emphasis on the body within Roman culture carried its own tensions. Philosophers and moralists debated the proper balance between physical and intellectual cultivation. Warnings against vanity and excess were common, urging citizens to pursue bodily excellence in the service of higher virtues rather than mere display. The baths, with their potent mix of discipline and indulgence, embodied this dynamic tension. They were spaces where the ideals of moderation and excess coexisted, where the pursuit of beauty could elevate or ensnare. Despite these complexities, the centrality of the body in Roman life remained unchallenged. The physical self was a canvas upon which identity, aspiration, and virtue were inscribed. The baths served as both workshop and gallery for this ongoing project, a place where citizens shaped and displayed the best versions of themselves. In imagining these ancient spaces, alive with the movement of bodies and the murmur of conversation, one can sense the deep cultural forces at work. The baths were not mere luxuries, but vital institutions that reinforced the values of an entire civilization. They taught discipline, fostered community, and celebrated the potential of the human form. In our next chapter, we will explore another dimension of the Roman bathing experience, its spiritual significance. Beyond the physical and social realms, the baths also served as sites of religious devotion and healing, connecting the body to the divine in ways both subtle and profound.
Chapter 13: The Role of Religion in the Baths. Amid the marble halls and murmured conversations of the Roman baths, the spiritual dimension of bathing wove itself quietly through the rhythms of daily life. For the Romans, who saw the divine in all aspects of the natural and built world, the act of cleansing the body was inseparable from the care of the soul. The baths were not merely places of physical renewal, but also spaces of ritual significance, where the boundaries between the human and the divine were subtly navigated. From their earliest iterations, Roman baths were linked to the forces of nature and the gods. Water itself was seen as a sacred element, a gift from the earth and the heavens, capable of purifying, healing, and restoring balance. Springs, rivers, and fountains were commonly associated with deities and spirits, their presence invoked through offerings and dedications. The aqueducts that brought water to the city were more than feats of engineering. They were conduits of the sacred, channeling the blessings of distant sources into the heart of urban life. Within the bathhouses, these associations were made manifest through architecture and ritual. Nymphaea shrines, dedicated to the nymphs of springs and streams, were common features, often set within or near the bathing complexes. Here, patrons might pause to offer prayers or tokens of gratitude, acknowledging the divine presence that animated the waters they were about to enter. Statues of water deities, both local and pan-Roman, adorned the halls and pools. Neptune, god of the sea, was a frequent figure, his image reinforcing the connection between water and power. Smaller household gods, the Lares and Penelope, were sometimes honored in discreet niches, their protection sought for the safety and health of those within. The rituals of the baths themselves carried spiritual undertones. The act of undressing, of shedding the garments of the outer world, mirrored a symbolic shedding of impurity and worldly concerns. The progression through the various chambers, from the vigorous exercise of through the cleansing heat of the caldarium, to the cooling embrace of the frigidarium, echoed ancient rites of purification and renewal. Each stage was a movement toward a state of physical and spiritual equilibrium. For many Romans, the baths also served as sites of healing pilgrimage. Certain waters were believed to possess curative properties, imbued with the favor of particular deities. Thermal springs and mineral baths, in particular, drew those seeking relief from ailments of the body and mind. The ritual of immersion, accompanied by prayers and offerings, was both a physical therapy and a spiritual supplication. The inscriptions left by grateful patrons' votive tablets, carved dedication sits to the profound impact these experiences held. The temples, often situated near major bath complexes, reinforced these connections. A visit to the baths might be accompanied by a stop at an adjoining shrine, where offerings were made before or after the bathing ritual. The intertwining of physical and spiritual care reflected a worldview in which health was understood as a holistic state, encompassing body, mind, and soul. Certain festivals and holy days saw the baths take on an even more pronounced religious character. Ritual cleansings were performed to mark transitions in life, marriage, military service, political office. On days of public purification, large numbers of citizens would gather to participate in collective rites, reinforcing communal bonds and shared values. The role of priests and augurs, while less visible within the daily operation of the baths, nonetheless underscored their spiritual significance. Their blessings and interpretations lent official sanction to the rituals performed within these walls, connecting personal acts of devotion to the broader religious life of the city. For individuals, the baths provided a space for personal reflection and connection with the divine. Amid the warmth and quiet, one might offer silent prayers, seek guidance, or give thanks for blessings received. The tactile nature of the experience, the feel of water on skin, the scent of sacred oils, the rhythm of breath depend this connection. Anchoring the spiritual in the immediacy of the body, the presence of sacred imagery further enriched the experience. Mosaics depicting scenes from mythology served not only as decoration but as reminders of the divine narratives that shaped Roman identity. The stories of heroes purified by water, of gods bestowing healing, resonated with the personal journeys of the bath. Even the sounds of the baths, the murmur of water, the echo of footsteps, the cadence of voices created an atmosphere conducive to contemplation. In this setting, the everyday merged with the eternal, the mundane with the sacred. The baths were, in essence, temples of the body, where the care of the self became an act of devotion. As you rest now, imagine these ancient halls, suffused with the presence of the divine. Picture the flicker of lamplight upon marble, the soft rustle of offerings laid at a shrine, the quiet prayers whispered into the steam. In our next segment, we will explore how this spiritual dimension influenced the evolution of the baths, shaping their role within the broader religious landscape of Rome and leaving a legacy that endured long after the empire's fall. Chapter 13: The Role of Religion in the Baths. Amid the marble halls and murmured conversations of the Roman baths, the spiritual dimension of bathing wove itself quietly through the rhythms of daily life. For the Romans, who saw the divine in all aspects of the natural and built world, the act of cleansing the body was inseparable from the care of the soul. The baths were not merely places of physical renewal, but also spaces of ritual significance, where the boundaries between the human and the divine were subtly navigated. From their earliest iterations, Roman baths were linked to the forces of nature and the gods. Water itself was seen as a sacred element, a gift from the earth and the heavens, capable of purifying, healing, and restoring balance. Springs, rivers, and fountains were commonly associated with deities and spirits, their presence invoked through offerings and dedications. The aqueducts that brought water to the city were more than feats of engineering. They were conduits of the sacred, channeling the blessings of distant sources into the heart of urban life. Within the bathhouses, these associations were made manifest through architecture and ritual. Nymphaean shrines dedicated to the nymphs of springs and streams were common features, often set within or near the bathing complexes. Here, patrons might pause to offer prayers or tokens of gratitude, acknowledging the divine presence that animated the waters they were about to enter. Statues of water deities, both local and pan-Roman, adorned the halls and pools. Neptune, god of the sea, was a frequent figure, his image reinforcing the connection between water and power. Smaller household gods, the Lares and Peanut, were sometimes honored in discreet niches, their protection sought for the safety and health of those within. The rituals of the baths themselves carried spiritual undertones. The act of undressing, of shedding the garments of the outer world, mirrored a symbolic shedding of impurity and worldly concerns. The progression through the various chambers, from the vigorous exercise of the through the cleansing heat of the caldarium to the cooling embrace of the frigidarium, echoed ancient rites of purification and renewal. Each stage was a movement toward a state of physical and spiritual equilibrium. For many Romans, the baths also served as sites of healing pilgrimage. Certain waters were believed to possess curative properties, imbued with the favor of particular deities. Thermal springs and mineral baths, in particular, drew those seeking relief from ailments of the body and mind. The ritual of immersion, accompanied by prayers and offerings, was both a physical therapy and a spiritual supplication. The inscriptions left by grateful patrons' votive tablet carved dedications ests to the profound impact these experiences held. The temples, often situated near major bath complexes, reinforced these connections. A visit to the baths might be accompanied by a stop at an adjoining shrine, where offerings were made before or after the bathing ritual. The intertwining of physical and spiritual care reflected a worldview in which health was understood as a holistic state, encompassing body, mind, and soul. Certain festivals and holy days saw the baths take on an even more pronounced religious character. Ritual cleansings were performed to mark transitions in life. Marriage, military service, political office. On days of public purification, large numbers of citizens would gather to participate in collective rites, reinforcing communal bonds and shared values. The role of priests and augurs, while less visible within the daily operation of the baths, nonetheless underscored their spiritual significance. Their blessings and interpretations lent official sanction to the rituals performed within these walls, connecting personal acts of devotion to the broader religious life of the city. For individuals, the baths provided a space for personal reflection and connection with the divine. Amid the warmth and quiet, one might offer silent prayers, seek guidance, or give thanks for blessings received. The tactile nature of the experience, the feel of water on skin, the scent of sacred oils, the rhythm of breath deepened this connection, anchoring the spiritual in the immediacy of the body. The presence of sacred imagery further enriched the experience. Mosaics depicting scenes from mythology served not only as decoration but as reminders of the divine narratives that shaped Roman identity. The stories of heroes purified by water, of gods bestowing healing, resonated with the personal journeys of the bath. Even the sounds of the baths, the murmur of water, the echo of footsteps, the cadence of voices created an atmosphere conducive to contemplation. In this setting, the everyday merged with the eternal, the mundane with the sacred. The baths were, in essence, temples of the body, where the care of the self became an act of devotion. As you rest now, imagine these ancient halls suffused with the presence of the divine. Picture the flicker of lamplight upon marble, the soft rustle of offerings laid at a shrine, the quiet prayers whispered into the steam. In our next segment, we will explore how this spiritual dimension influenced the evolution of the baths, shaping their role within the broader religious landscape of Rome and leaving a legacy that endured long after the empire's fall. Chapter 14: Decline of the Great Baths. From empire to ruins, in their heyday, the Roman baths stood as shimmering testaments to imperial power, civic pride, and cultural sophistication. To enter the towering halls of the baths of Caracalla or Diocletian was to experience Rome's mastery over stone, water, and the human body. Yet even the most enduring monuments are subject to the inexorable tides of history. The decline of the great baths mirrored the gradual unraveling of the empire itself, a slow and complex process shaped by shifting fortunes, changing values, and the relentless passage of time. The early signs of decline were subtle. As the 3rd and 4th centuries progressed, the pressures facing the empire mounted. Political instability, economic strain, and external threats drew resources and attention away from civic amenities. The maintenance of the baths, once a matter of public pride and imperial patronage, began to suffer. The intricate systems that kept the water flowing and the hypocausts burning required constant care. Skilled laborers maintained the aqueducts, cleared the drains, and repaired the aging masonry. When these tasks were neglected, even briefly, the effects rippled through the complex. A blocked channel led to stagnant water. An unrepaired furnace diminished the heat of the caldarium. Patrons noticed the difference. Complaints circulated, attendance waned. The strain on the aqueducts was particularly acute, as invasions and internal conflicts disrupted the empire's infrastructure. The flow of fresh water into the city became less reliable. Periods of drought or siege further exacerbated the problem. Without the constant influx of clean water, the baths could not function as intended. Some facilities adapted, operating on a reduced scale. Others closed their doors, awaiting better days that would never come. Economic factors played a major role. The cost of maintaining the great thermae was immense. Fuel for the hypocausts, oil for the lamps, wages for the attendant soul required a steady outlay. As imperial revenues dwindled, subsidies to the baths were were among the first to be cut. Private patrons, too, grew more cautious with their spending, investing less in public displays of generosity. The social fabric of the baths also began to fray. The ideals of civic unity and shared identity that had once infused the thermi grew harder to sustain in a world increasingly marked by division and uncertainty. The old rhythms of the bath's exercise, cleansing, social exchange persisted in some quarters but faltered in others. Spaces that had once thronged with life stood empty or echoed only with the footsteps of a few loyal patrons. Cultural shifts further hastened the decline. As Christianity gained prominence, the values associated with the baths came under new scrutiny. Early Christian leaders, while acknowledging the health benefits of bathing, criticized the excesses and moral laxity that sometimes accompanied public bathing culture. Calls for modesty and restraint clashed with the traditions of the thermi, leading many devout citizens to curtail their visits or seek more private alternatives. The baths adapted where they could. Inscriptions invoking Christian blessings appeared. Certain practices were toned down, yet the association of the baths with a fading pagan past lingered, coloring perceptions. The imperial court, increasingly oriented toward new centers of power such as Constantinople, devoted less attention to the public life of Rome. Without strong patronage, even the grandest bathhouses began to slip into neglect. The very scale that had once awed now became a burden. The vast halls and soaring domes, too costly to maintain in a time of contraction. Nature, too, took its toll. Earthquakes damaged aqueducts and buildings. The gradual encroachment of vegetation wore away at stone and mortar. As the urban population declined, neighborhoods around the baths emptied. The echoes of laughter and conversation faded, replaced by the quiet hum of wind through broken arches. By the 5th century, many of the great thermi stood abandoned or reaped. Some became shelters for the poor or quarters for troops. Others served as quarries, their fine marble and bronze stripped for reuse in churches or new constructions. The ideals they embodied, harmony, health, civic unity, remained in memory but no longer in practice. Yet even in decline, the baths retained a certain majesty. Travelers and chroniclers of the late empire marveled at the ruins, their columns and vaults still standing against the sky. The grandeur of these spaces, even in decay, testified to the greatness of what had been. For those who paused to reflect amid the fallen stones, the baths spoke of a time when the rhythms of daily life intertwined with the highest aspirations of a civilization. As you rest now, imagine these once vibrant halls growing still, the last tendrils of steam rising into the cool air, the marble floors cooling beneath empty arches. In our next segment, we will explore the enduring legacy of the Roman baths, tracing how their spirit and influence lived on long after the empire's fall. Even as the grand thermi of Rome fell into ruin, their legacy endured, woven into the fabric of later cultures in ways both tangible and unseen. The baths had been more than stone and water. They were expressions of a worldview that celebrated the unity of body, mind, and community. Though the physical structures crumbled, the ideals they embodied continued to shape human experience across the centuries. The most direct legacy was architectural. The innovations perfected in the Roman baths, the mastery of arches and domes, the integration of light and space, the use of heating systems left a profound mark on the built environment of medieval and Renaissance Europe. Architects who gazed upon the ruins of the baths of Caracalla or Diocletian drew inspiration from their soaring vaults and harmonious proportions. The great cathedrals of Christendom, with their vast interiors and rhythmic forms, carried echoes of these ancient spaces. The Renaissance revival of classical architecture brought renewed attention to the baths. Scholars studied their remains, artists sketched their crumbling arches, and builders sought to recover the principles of proportion and harmony that had once animated these halls. The domes of Florence and Rome, the stately columns of civic buildings across Europe, all bore the imprint of Roman ingenuity. Beyond architecture, the baths influenced ideas of public life and civic responsibility. The notion that the health of the citizenry was a matter of communal concern, central to the Roman conception of the baths, found new expression in later centuries. Public bathhouses re-emerged in medieval Islamic cities, their designs informed by the Roman model. In Europe, the rise of spa culture in the 17th and 18th centuries echoed ancient practices, blending the pursuit of health with social interaction. The ideal of balancing physical well-being with intellectual and social life, so central to the Roman baths, continued to resonate. The very concept of leisure as a vital component of civic life owed much to the legacy of the ruins themselves became sites of reflection and inspiration. Pilgrims, poets, and philosophers wandered among the fallen columns, contemplating the rise and fall of empires. The baths of Caracalla, with their towering walls silhouetted against the Roman sky, became a symbol of both the grandeur of the past and the impermanence of human endeavor. In literature and art, the image of the abandoned bathhouse evoked themes of loss, memory, and the passage of time. Yet amid the melancholy, there was also admiration or recognition of the vision and craftsmanship that had created these wonders. The ideals that had shaped the Roman baths' harmony, balance, the integration of body and spirit found echoes in new contexts. In the modern era, the resurgence of interest in wellness, holistic health, and the design of spaces that nurture both physical and mental well-being can trace its lineage, in part, to these ancient traditions. The concept of public spaces dedicated to communal well-being, open to all regardless of rank or wealth, remains a powerful ideal. In this sense, the spirit of the Roman baths lives on. To walk among their ruins today is to feel a connection not only to the past, but to enduring human aspirations. The play of light on ancient stone, the whisper of wind through empty chambers, invites contemplation of a world where the care of the body was inseparable from the life of the mind and the bonds of community. As you rest now, picture these great spaces as they once were, alive with movement, laughter, and quiet reflection. Imagine the steam rising into vaulted domes, the gleam of polished marble, the gentle murmur of water. Though time has taken its toll, the vision that shaped the Roman baths continues to inspire, reminding us of the timeless pursuit of harmony between self, society, and the world around us.
As the sun sets over the 7 hills of Rome and the streets below the Palatine and Aventine grow quiet, imagine for a moment those ancient baths standing in the twilight, vast open to the cool evening air, their great arches casting long shadows across marble floors. Once bustling with the rhythm of Roman life, now resting beneath the slowly turning stars. The baths had always been a reflection of their world, alive with voices, with the soft splash of water, with the scent of oils and perfumes drifting through the chambers. Here, beneath vaulted ceilings, citizens of all ranks had gathered to refresh not only their bodies, but their spirits. And even now, with the passing of centuries, that spirit lingers etched in the worn stone, whispered in the gentle breeze that moves through broken colonnades. Let us take a final slow walk through those ancient halls. Imagine stepping once more into the palestra, where once the thud of feet on sand and the sharp calls of friendly rivals echoed in the morning light. The colonnades still stand in places, their surfaces smoothed by countless passing hands. We pause, breathing in the faint memory of vitality and vigor that still seems to cling to the space. From there, we drift into the tepidarium, where once the air was warm and softly scented, the stone benches inviting long, easy conversations. Here, the pace slows further. Time seems suspended. You can almost hear the low murmur of voices sharing news of the city, of family, of distant provinces, of matters both grand and small. The light filters gently through high arched windows, dappling the stone with soft patterns. We move onward to the great caldarium, once dense with steam, its vast dome arching high above. The warmth here would have embraced weary limbs, soothing tension, inviting rest. The mosaics that once gleamed underfoot may now be faded, but their artistry still stirs the imagination. Picture the bathers reclining along the marble benches, their forms half veiled by rising mist, immersed in a ritual both personal and communal. For this was a space not only for cleansing the body, but for easing the mind, for laying aside the cares of the day. Finally, we pass into the cool, tranquil frigidarium, where crisp waters once awaited those seeking renewal. The soft echo of dripping water lingers in the air. The room invites quiet reflection. Imagine lowering yourself into the pool, the chill awakening the senses, the contrast sharpening every moment. In this space, more than any other, the union of body and spirit is felt, a reminder of the enduring rhythm of life, of balance, of renewal. Beyond these walls, the world has changed. Empires have risen and fallen. Faiths have transformed. Yet something of the Roman baths remains an idea, a feeling, a recognition of the deep human need for rest, for care, for moments of pause amid the currents of life. We may no longer gather beneath these ancient domes, but we still seek spaces where body and mind might be refreshed, where we might share time and conversation with others, where we might be reminded of the simple joys of being alive. So, as you drift now in thought, let the quiet of these long-forgotten halls wrap around you. Picture the columns standing silent beneath the stars, the marble floors cool beneath the night air, the gentle memory of voices and laughter fading softly into stillness. The baths may be ruins now, but their legacy endures in every space where we seek renewal, in every act of care we offer ourselves and others. In the next segment, we will linger just a little longer, bringing this gentle journey to its close, reflecting on the lessons the Roman baths still whisper to us today.